Chapter 55. Phew, I'm finally full. Patting his slightly bulging belly, Jiang Hai chuckled, and threw the trash in his hand into the trash can next to him. Only then did he have the leisure and time to stop and look at the place where he was. There were many Chinese in the United States, and as the place where the highest universities in the United States gathered, there were even more Chinese in Boston. After all, for the Chinese, education had always been the top priority. Compared with the prosperous but chaotic New York, Boston, the city of universities, was more popular among the Chinese. As long as you went out here, whether it was on campus, on the street, in restaurants, shopping malls, parks, supermarkets, subway stations, etc., you could catch the Huaxia people everywhere, not to mention the Huaxia people's settlement in Chinatown abroad. Some statistics said that the cleanest and tittiest Huaxia city in the United States was Boston's Huaxia City. There were many Huaxia elements here. Walking through the big sign that said "The world is public," you would officially enter Boston's Huaxia City. Compared with the West Coast that mainlanders preferred, the people who migrated to the East Coast earlier were basically immigrants from Xinjiang or Guangdong province. Therefore, Huaxia City here had a strong Xinjiang style. At a glance, almost most of the people were Chinese, and the shop signs were basically written in traditional Chinese characters. Compared with the legendary New York or other Huaxia City, Boston's Huaxia City was much more peaceful. The Huaxia City here was much more peaceful. Occasionally, the non-Chinese people who flashed by were basically blonde white people. There were almost not too many black people and Middle Eastern people. Of course, this was not absolute. In this world, it was impossible to measure whether a person was a good person or a bad person based on their race. You couldn't say that a race from birth was all bad people, and there was no good person. This was impossible. In this world, there were not so many black and white, and there were more gray in the middle. Jiang Hai walked on the street here, and his eyes were also looking around. The first impression that Huaxia gave people was eating, so in Huaxia City, there were almost restaurants everywhere. There were seafood restaurants, fast food restaurants, and these were all characteristics of Guangdong province. In addition, there were people from other provinces, such as hot pot restaurants. All kinds of stir-fried dishes were also very common here. All in all, this was a food paradise. And besides the restaurants, the most things here made Jiang Hai a little surprised. Because according to Jiang Hai's idea, Huaxia City's most popular must be restaurants, and the second most were probably supermarkets. Although there were a lot of supermarkets, there were not as many of these shops. These shops were almost impossible to see in China, but they had taken root here. These shops were called martial arts centers. Yes, they taught people martial arts. Although it was not clear how attractive the mud control was to the Americans, there were many martial arts schools on the street. Tai Chi, Baji 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 Baji, Hong Quan, Yixing Tan Tue. Almost all of the martial arts that Jiang Hai had heard of before, and those that he had never heard of were here. But if one were to talk about the martial arts school with the most practice, it would be Jeet Kune Do. This martial arts school was created by Bruce Lee, who used Wing Chun as a foundation, and combined it with the martial arts that the Zhou clan was good at. It obviously had a great reputation in the US. Although it was not like Taekwondo, Judo, Aikido, and other foreign martial arts, it was very effective. However, the results were very extensive. Jiang Hai saw with his own eyes that in the martial arts center, there were many blonde-haired, blue-eyed and dark-skinned children, waving their fists with all their might. This made Jiang Hai somewhat curious, and at the same time reminded him of yesterday's fight. Jiang Hai's current physical fitness was new. Yesterday, when he fought against 11 people, he only suffered some superficial injuries. However, those guys suffered heavy casualties. Today, he heard that although those guys did not die, they would have to be bedridden for at least 3 to 5 months. Moreover, these guys' crimes were the easiest to convict. The evidence was conclusive, and they were definitely guilty. But now it was up to how the punishment would be decided. According to Moses Adams, murder might not be established, but robbery and intentional kidnapping were definitely not going to escape. The lightest punishment was that these people would have to spend at least 5 years in prison before they could be released. Jiang Hai curled his lips at such a punishment. He felt that it was a little light. However, when he thought about it, according to the temperament of the prison in the United States, after these young boys went in, their chrysanthemums would at least become sunflowers. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's mentality calmed down a little. Now that he saw the martial arts school, he suddenly remembered the fight yesterday. Although his physical fitness was extremely strong, his combat experience and tactics were really lacking. It seemed that it was time for him to learn. Of course, Jiang Hai did not mean to learn here. The things here were basically just for show. There were very few practical things. When he said to learn, he meant that he would go home and learn. Don't forget, his family had Bell Lester, who had just retired from the Triangle State for a year. Although he was a sniper, he should know a lot about close combat as well. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai also stored this matter in his mind and continued to walk around Huaxia City. Traveling was basically like this. Walk and stop, look at the surrounding buildings and taste the street food. Although it was only Jiang Hai alone, he had a lot of fun. Unknowingly, he had finished walking around this small area. At this time, Ai Dehua also called him and told him that the boat was almost finished. Now they were testing the water to see if there were any leaks. If there were no leaks, they could be pulled back by car. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai's Boston tour came to an end. Following the route in his memory, he returned to Little Italy and returned to the port. Sure enough, the three boats had already begun to enter the water. They were testing almost at the same time. Looking at the three small boats that were like a sharp sword, cutting through layers of waves and pushing forward, Jiang Hai couldn't help but want to eat. In fact, if you knew how to drive a car, you could basically drive it. However, if you wanted to drive it on the sea, you would need a separate license. However, after Jiang Hai bought it, he would play in his own manner. This was something that others could not control. After all, it was his private territory. Even if he drove a tank in his own territory, others could not control it. Boss, do you want to come down and play? At this time, Ai Dehua drove the deck boat to the shore and said to Jiang Hai with a smile, "Okay." Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai laughed, then exerted his feet and jumped directly into the deck boat. This shocked everyone next to him. Even Ai Dehua was shocked. Originally, he wanted to drive to the shore, fix the boat, and then let Jiang Hai get down with a plank. He didn't expect Jiang Hai to jump down directly. "Boss, this is too dangerous." After feeling the boat shake for a while, it slowly stabilized. Ai Dehua couldn't help but say to Jiang Hai speechlessly, "Doing this is indeed very dangerous." "Oh, I know. Next time slow down a little." Okay, hurry up and drive a lap. Let me see how fast this boat can go." At this time Jiang Hai, who had stabilized his center of gravity, also smiled awkwardly. He was a little too careless. This boat was not as stable as he thought on the water. At this time, hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile slightly awkwardly. But then he changed the topic. He wanted to see how fast this boat can go. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He pushed the gear lever, and the deck boat was at full power, rushing straight to the distant sea. Feeling the suddenly strong sea breeze, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, "This boat is really beautiful." After playing around in the shipyard for more than an hour, Jiang Hai personally sat on all three ships. Only then was he finished. Then he rented a truck that was specially used by the shipyard to pull boats. Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua drove the truck and took them back to their manor. In fact, these three boats were not too heavy. Jiang Hai's F-750 could also be pulled. But Jiang Hai's car didn't have a drawbar installed, so he couldn't pull it for the time being, so he could only rent the shipyard's truck. But fortunately, Jiang Hai's order was more than 1,000,000 yuan, so the rental was waived by Dalton. But the driver had to make a trip, so Jiang Hai didn't care about it. After driving the truck back to the manor, Jiang Hai and the others began to get busy again. Only Burke and Philip, the two old men, were left in the cowshed. The others came to help unload the boats to the shore. Although Jiang Hai's gravity wharf had been built for more than 10 years, it was still very stable. At least this year, they didn't have to worry about it. It was already night by the time they got the boats into a dock that had been built long ago next to the wharf. After giving the driver a tip of $200, Jiang Hai sent him out of the manor. At this time, he was so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back. Fortunately, Mrs. Philip had already prepared dinner, so Jiang Hai went to Philip's small villa and stuffed himself with food. After dinner, he returned to his villa. Jiang Hai lay on his huge bed. He casually took out a small notebook from the bedside table. There were some words recorded in the notebook. It was mainly divided into two parts. One part was the steps of the manor's development that he and Luo Binci had studied together. Recruiting people, buying a car, buying a cow, buying a horse, buying a boat. Most of these main expenses had been ticked, which meant that they had already been bought. Today, Jiang Hai ticked another tick after the boat, which meant that this thing was already done. The only thing that was lacking now was fish seedlings. But according to AI Dehua, it was too late to release the fish seedlings now. It was better to wait until next year. Moreover, Jiang Hai didn't have much money to buy the fish seedlings. The other part of the notebook recorded his expenses. Looking at the strings of numbers written in it, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a headache. Today's first update. I was cooking and forgot. I'll send it to everyone right away. Chapter 56. Selling gems, a total of 332. 15 million. Buying the manor, 280 million. 52. 25 million left. Looking at the records in the notebook, Jiang Hai couldn't help but rub his temples. It seemed that he didn't have enough money. Although he knew that the manor's income in the future would definitely be more than what was on the books, it seemed that he had overspent. Jiang Hai had more than 52 million left after buying the manor. He had spent more than 20 million on cattle, various things, renovations, cars, horses, and so on. Including the boat he had bought today, he had spent almost 6 million. Last night, he had given the lawyer 2 million in a moment of impulse, so that was 7 million. Including the money for the cattle, he had spent almost 30 million. He still had about 20 million left. For the expenses of the 7 people under him, he spent more than $5,000 a week, $250,000 a year, almost $260,000. He had to provide the money for food. In the United States, there was no such thing as fooling the workers. Moreover, they were cowboys, so he had to provide them with meat every day. If the food cost was $20 a day, including himself, it would be $180 a day. Not to mention that they also had to eat some snacks. It would be $200 a day, which would be $73,000 a year. In addition, he would occasionally treat them generously, which would be $100,000 a year. In other words, he would have to pay nearly $400,000 a year just for labor alone, including the gas for the car and the diesel for the boat, which he had bought with high horsepower. He would have to spend at least $10,000 a month and another $100,000 a year. Also, he had to buy feed for the cattle and horses, and so on. Just the food for these people, the horses, and the wages for these workers. Jiang Hai estimated that he would have to spend more than $1 million a year. In addition, he had to pay taxes. Although he hadn't turned a profit yet, the land use tax didn't matter whether he was profitable or not. This was close to $4 million a year. There was also Social Security and medical insurance. Jiang Hai didn't care for Social Security in the United States, but he wasn't allowed to pay for these two things. Medical insurance was extremely important in the United States. If you didn't have medical insurance, you would have to spend thousands of dollars to treat a cold here. If you broke a tooth, congratulations, it would be impossible to fix it without tens of thousands of dollars. Therefore, under such circumstances, Jiang Hai was also very helpless. Thinking about it this way, the 20 million he had on him could still be used. Less than 14 million might seem like a lot, but it was obvious that 14 million was really not a lot compared to 330 million. Most importantly, because of the improvement of the pasture, Jiang Hai had a lot of confidence in his cattle. If he wanted to make a lot of money, he would probably have to raise fish on his agenda. But fry, that was very expensive. According to AI Dehua, there were several ways to raise fish or raise seafood. The first was the most common way. The fish raised like this were destined to not sell for a high price, but the cost of raising them was very low. One only needed to buy some nets, enclose the fish together, and feed them regularly. However, because these fish didn't exercise, it was difficult to sell them for a lot of money due to the excessive fat content in their bodies. The second way was free-range farming. That was to set up some nets at the border of one's own fishing ground. Then, in the world of the nets, an independent small world would be established, and a special ecosystem would be established here to feed the fish. However, there were some problems with this kind of feeding, and that was that it would have a lot of impact on the ecological balance of the seabed. The third way was to completely free-range farming. Similarly, some nets would be set up outside the fishing ground to prevent the fish from escaping. Then, a small food chain would be established at the bottom of the sea. Raising fish naturally required raising big fish. Take codfish for example. This kind of fish ate shrimps when they were young, so a lot of shrimps had to be raised in the sea. When they grew up, they ate squid and octopus, so a lot of them had to be raised. A food chain was formed underwater, and the fish raised were the fish at the top of the food chain. In this way, the quality of the fish would be the best, but there was a problem. It was too expensive to raise fish this way. Take the smallest shrimp as an example. At present, the best quality and highest energy shrimp in the world was the Antarctic scaled shrimp. But this shrimp was in the Antarctic. The cost of transporting it was more expensive than the shrimp itself, so the loss outweighed the gain. But to make up for it, it was also good to use the Arctic scaled shrimp. This kind of shrimp was very sweet and nutritious, but it was relatively large, so it was mainly fed with shrimp fry. After a batch of shrimp grew up, new shrimp fry were needed to feed the fish. This kind of shrimp fry was 80 cents per kilogram, and a ship of 10 tons of shrimp ferry could supply 20,000 codfish fry for half a month. Jianghai's fish farming was not like cattle farming. There were 20,000 fish and nothing could be seen. The coastline of Jianghai's manor was extremely long. There were 300,000 fish fry here, and not even a splash could be seen. In that case, the fry would have to eat 300 tons of shrimp every month. 1 ton was $800, so 300 tons would be $240,000, and that was just for a month. The squid and octopus cubs would also have to be bought, which were even more expensive. Codfish was different from other fish. It took time for them to grow. Unlike ordinary freshwater fish that could be fished out in a few months, codfish tasted better the longer they were grown. They could grow up to 10 years, 1 or 2 meters long. So basically, they would raise them for about 1 or 2 years before starting to harvest them. However, the cost of feeding codfish for a month was about $30,000 to $40,000. In other words, the cost of feeding codfish alone was at least $10 million, not to mention the cost of the seaweed. This was not even the cost of the fish fry. Thinking of this, Jianghai could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. It seemed that the remaining $20 million in his hands was not enough to do anything. I have to find a way to get some money to spend. Jianghai clicked his teeth and muttered in a low voice. Woof woof. Perhaps they heard Jianghai's words. Xiaobai and Jianghai, who were lying on their stomachs in his room, could not help but jump up. They lay on their stomachs beside Jianghai's bed and looked at Jianghai strangely. They thought that Jianghai was talking to them. What are you doing? Go down. Jianghai patted the 2 big dogs' heads with his foot and said angrily. When they heard Jianghai's words, the 2 big dogs looked at each other, lay down again, and continued to watch the TV in front of them. Jianghai fell into deep thought. In fact, there were still many ways for Jianghai to earn money. Not to mention those illegal businesses. He now had a big family business, and there was no need to mess around. He could think of many legal businesses, all of which were related to the sea. Don't forget that Jianghai can now move freely in the water, and he is not affected by the water pressure, so he can explore the deep sea. Whether it is to find oil fields or natural gas, it is a good way to make a fortune. However, this method is easy to attract the attention of the state, and the loss is not worth it. There are also ways that do not attract the attention of the state, such as salvaging some sunken ships. The cultural relics inside are probably worth a lot. Gold in troubled times, antiques in prosperous times. Although there are still sporadic wars in the world, the main few places, North America, Europe, and East Asia, are all very stable. And these are the main places to earn money. If he goes to the sunken ship to get some antiques, or cooperate with others to salvage the ship, then he will make a lot of money. A valuable sunken ship is worth at least 1 billion or 800 million. It is not too much for him to get a share of 100 million. When he salvages 5 or 6 ships a year, that is $500 or $600 million. And it is the kind that does not need to be taxed. How free it is. However, there is a problem. Jiang Hai's current strength is only the limit of human beings. If he encounters a shark, a king squid, or a whale in the sea, he will not be able to defeat them. Don't look at how Jiang Hai's courage is not small when it comes to fighting, but in the sea, he really doesn't have any confidence. He was a person who cherished his life very much. Last time, when he saw a shark in the distance in his own fishing ground, he immediately swam back. Now he was going to salvage a ship in the deep sea. He was a little scared just thinking about it. This idea, I have to at least wait until I reach 3 levels. In the small notebook, Jiang Hai drew 3, and then a big circle. He will not risk his life. He is not willing to go to natural resources such as oil and natural gas, because it is easy to make a wedding dress for other countries. He also does not dare to salvage sunken ships and antiques, because he is afraid that he will be swallowed by aquatic animals. Under the policy of being afraid of wolves in front and tigers in the back, Jiang Hai scratched his head hard. It seems that there is really no way to make money. Thinking of this, he can't help but sigh and lean directly on his bed. I don't want to open source. It seems that I can only think of ways to reduce the flow. In the future, except for food, other things will be simpler. Those imaginary yachts, planes, and foreign horses, I will say goodbye to you for the time being. Muttering to himself, Jiang Hai smiled self-deprecatingly. It is said that men become bad when they are rich. In fact, this is also relative, mainly related to the environment. If Jiang Hai lives in the city after he has money, he will inevitably come into contact with some people of the upper class. When these guys come, famous brands, beautiful girls, sports cars, planes, and yachts will all come. But now, he does not know such friends, and he does not know those messy places. So he is just thinking about it. A long, long time ago, an ancient person once said that it is impossible for an otaku to commit a crime, and it is difficult for them to become bad. It couldn't be a crime, because they were waiting to read the new episodes and novels every week. It was impossible for them to turn bad, because there was no soil for them to turn bad. It wasn't easy for them to turn bad if they stayed at home all the time. Oh, I am really a little self-destructive. How can there be such a useless rich man like me? He sighed helplessly and accepted his fate. Second update, continuously delivered. Please support Xiaofei's new book. If you don't have a collection, please help. Chapter 57. Hiss. Standing in front of the sunny windowsill, Jiang Hai stretched. Although the weather outside was a little cold, it was still warm inside the house. Jiang Hai's room. No, it could be said that all the rooms in Jiang Hai's house had independent heating facilities. It was different from the coal burning in the northeast of China during winter, which caused serious pollution. In the United States, there were basically 2 types of geothermal heat. One was natural gas, and the other was electricity. Especially electricity. This was a new energy source that had just emerged in recent years. In the United States, water and electricity bills were not considered expensive. Of course, if you multiplied everything by 6, then other than the hamburgers, everything here would be expensive. After all, the money earned here was in dollars, and the money spent here was also in dollars, so it had to be calculated in dollars. The water and electricity bills in the United States were different from state to state. After all, some places were rich in water, so it was cheap. Some places, such as California or Phoenix, were deserts, so the water bills were naturally expensive. As for the electricity bills, they were basically the same. It was cheap where there was electricity, and expensive where there was no electricity. Although the living resources in Boston where Jiang Hai lived were more expensive, to be honest, the water and electricity were not expensive. After all, the freshwater resources here were very rich. Although there were no big rivers, there were too many small rivers. The underground water was also very rich, so the water bills were very cheap. According to the calculation here, it was $0.3 per cubic foot. In terms of tons, it was about 50 cents per ton, which was equivalent to 50 cents. It was indeed not expensive. Electricity was even cheaper. There were a total of 117 nuclear power plants in the United States. Among them, there were as many as 2 in the Boston area. Therefore, the electricity here was very cheap, about 8 cents per kilowatt hour. The government had a policy on gas. In the winter, many people still burn gas, so the price was very low, about 0.6 cents per cubic foot. In the summer, it was slightly more expensive, but it did not exceed 2 cents per cubic foot. All in all, the price of these things here was indeed very cheap. When Jiang Hai rebuilt his house, he replaced all the gas floor heating with electricity. After all, this kind of floor heating was safer. If the gas ran out, it would really be out of gas. Although it was slightly more expensive, safety was the most important thing. Second, there was no smell. Third, it was more environmentally friendly. But then again, the electricity bills here were very cheap, which was the most important thing. His entire villa was powered 24 hours a day, which meant that it consumed around 200 kilowatts of electricity every day. Even if it was 3 months or 100 days in the winter, it would only consume 20,000 kilowatts of electricity, which was only $1,600 in US dollars. It wasn't expensive at all, including the small villas next to him, and the ones where Robbins and the others lived. It would only cost about $2,000 a winter. But he slept very comfortably. Walking barefoot on the ground, Jiang Hai yawned. He didn't want to get out of bed. Boom! Seeing Jiang Hai's comfortable appearance, Goldie and Xiaobai, who were lying at the door, could not help but bark. Jiang Hai glanced at them anxiously, and could not help but pat his forehead. It was a little cold last night, so he closed the door and slept. These guys must have wanted to go to the bathroom for a long time. However, after drinking Jiang Hai's blood, why did it sound so awkward? But it was really his blood. These 2 dogs had indeed become a lot smarter. He only needed to say it once, and they knew not to go to the bathroom in the room. Now, even if they wanted to pee, they would hold it in. Let's go. After putting on a simple coat and shoes, Jiang Hai opened the door. As soon as the door opened, the 2 dogs rushed out, and Jiang Hai followed them out to prepare breakfast. However, before he turned into the kitchen, Jiang Hai saw Belle driving an all-terrain vehicle at this time, pulling a large cart of hay behind it, heading in the direction of the cowshed. Since Jiang Hai moved here, he had only been to the cowshed a total of 5 or 6 times. Every time he went in, he had to endure the stench. He was indeed not cut out for work. But fortunately, he was more at ease. Recently, the lawn of the manor had basically been improved by him. Whether it was fresh grass or dried grass, the energy in it was quite good. After eating the cows, not only did the meat taste better, but they also became smarter. Although they were not as smart as directly absorbing blood, at least they were not too noisy, and it was not easy to cause a ruckus. This made Luo Binsi and others, who were ready to do a big job, a little speechless. It was almost like when a pregnant woman went to a family with a child and asked how to take care of the child. The family told her that the child was very noisy. Basically, the child slept for less than 3 hours every day and was always crying. This made her 200% mentally prepared. But after the child was born, you found that the child hardly cried. The sitting time was accurate. And when it ate, it was normal, not sick, not in a mood, which made your initial preparations go to waste. But in any case, the cattle were so convenient, and they were also very happy. Now they are ready to observe for 2 more days, and then they are ready to start grazing. Although it is almost winter now, the grass on Jiang Hai's pasture is still green, and it can be grazed for a few more days. Wait until it snows. As for the winter feed, it has already been prepared. Boss, good morning. Seeing Jiang Hai, Belle couldn't help but smile and wave to Jiang Hai. Hey, Belle, wait a minute. Seeing Belle's happy look, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stop him. What's the matter, boss? Boss. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also stopped the car and asked strangely. Belle, weren't you from the Triangle State? Then do you know any fighting techniques? Can you teach me? Looking at Belle, Jiang Hai hurriedly said, now they are busy, it's better not to make trouble. Oh okay, I'm not too busy now. After lunch, I'll come and teach you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle didn't hesitate and nodded in agreement. This made Jiang Hai's original idea of spending money extinguish. Of course, he knows that in the United States, everything is about money. Although Belle didn't mention it, he still needs to prepare first. That's okay. What do I need to prepare? Hearing Belle agree, Jiang Hai also asked happily. Don't eat too much, 80% full is enough. Boss, 70% full is enough. Just wear a set of loose sportswear. After thinking about it, Belle smiled and said to Jiang Hai in front of him. Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Then I'll go first. Seeing that Jiang Hai has understood, Belle waved to Jiang Hai and then drove away. After he left, Jiang Hai went back to wash his face and brush his teeth. After everything was done, he casually made some food at home, and then found a set of sportswear. Compared with other rich people, Jiang Hai's clothes are much simpler. After all, in his bones he was still an ordinary loser. Those donkeys, IMO, Fantasia, and the like, he didn't dare to be interested in them. Those casual clothes and suits, Jiang Hai's feelings towards them were ordinary. He didn't feel anything about creating the feeling of a successful person. Therefore, after he became rich, he went to buy a lot of clothes. However, he only bought 3 types of clothes. One was for wearing at home, and the other was for sportswear. In the past, he didn't dare to buy Nike because it was too expensive. However, after he arrived in the US, he specifically chose to buy this. UA is actually not bad, but UA's size is small, and he doesn't like it very much. In addition to these 2 kinds of clothes, he bought a lot of outdoor clothes, hiking pants, hiking shoes, jacket, and so on. He also likes these. Of course, in fact, according to Robbins, Jiang Hai should also have a set of denim clothes. So he also bought a set, but after buying it, it seemed that he only wore it once and never wore it again. The tassels on the pants and the waistband looked really stupid. Stupid to the point of making people's hair stand on end. At least for now, it is difficult for him to accept. Of course, if it is such a party, he doesn't mind wearing it. After changing into a loose sportswear, Jiang Hai first went to the cowshed to take a look. When there were 5,000 cows, the stench was already overwhelming. Now that there are 20,000 cows, the smell is even stronger. Even people like Robbins who work here are afraid of being poisoned. After all, farts contain methane, and cows are one of the animals most willing to fart. Generally speaking, farts are produced because of the sugar and fiber in the food. These things are the food of E. coli bacteria. After eating these things, the bacteria will produce farts. Cows need to regurgitate these things. Every time they regurgitate a piece of food, they will produce a new fart. Therefore, global warming and the like are inseparable from cows. Even if the place is ventilated, the smell is still unbearable. If they are locked up, Jiang Hai's cows will probably be suffocated to death by tomorrow. He came here to see the cows, but more importantly, he came to see his horse. When he first bought a horse, he specially bought a Shire horse. Although it is not a purebred, it is still quite big. After the horse arrived at the farm, it was considered to be under Jiang Hai's command. Every day, whenever Jiang Hai has time, he will come over to feed it some grass and carrots. Of course, these things are also added. As for the other horses, sometimes he will also give them some, but the amount is not much. When the huge horse saw Jiang Hai coming from afar, it was already happy in the stable. All right, let's eat. Jiang Hai walked over and patted the huge horse's neck with a smile. Then he took the prepared food and began to feed the horse. After playing with the huge Shire horse for a while, Jiang Hai looked at the time and returned to Mrs. Philemon's place. After lunch, he called Belle and sat in the villa to wait for him. Today's update was 2 chapters consecutively. In the book review section, there were people who said that Xiao Fei's early chapters were too big and would be easy to fail. However, Xiao Fei wanted to say, "You didn't see the outline of Xiao Fei's novel and didn't see the arrangement of the plot. Do you think I won't fail just because you say so? Whether the results are good or not, at least the word count of the novel is not a problem at all. As long as you have confidence in Xiao Fei will continue to write. Please support Xiao Fei and collect more. Please everyone. Chapter 58. Hi boss. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Bell walked in from outside the door with a smile. He skillfully changed out of the pair of riding boots, still stained with cow dung at the door, and put on a pair of sneakers he brought before walking into the villa. Hey, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Shall we start now? Seeing Bell's arrival, Jiang Hai immediately said with a smile. Yes. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two also came to the training room that Jiang Hai specially built. Well, it was specially built by the former owner of this house. Because it was well protected, Jiang Hai didn't add anything here. After all, those dumbbells and barbells are made of metal. They won't break even after 8 or 10 years. Not to mention they are not stained with water, and there is almost no rust. Only the treadmill, mountaineering machine, and the like are broken. But Jiang Hai usually doesn't use these things. If they break, he throws them away. He didn't buy new ones. Instead, he emptied a huge space in the room and put a cushion in the middle. Originally, he thought that if he finds a girl in the future, she can practice yoga here. But now there is no girl, so he will use it first. Boss, tell me first, what do you want to practice? When he came here, Bell patted the dust on his pants and sat directly on the cushion and asked Jiang Hai. He said this because he wanted to see how far Jiang Hai wants to practice. Of course it's the most powerful. However, considering his physical fitness, Jiang Hai didn't even think about it. That's very hard. But I think with the boss' physical fitness, it shouldn't be a problem. What does the boss know about fighting and fighting? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bell nodded with a smile. It seemed that it was not beyond his expectations. Fighting and fighting, do you mean the kind? I know of course the most famous one is our Huasia's Wushu, Korea's Taekwondo, Japan's Judo, Karate, and Muay Thai and boxing, and the recently popular kickboxing, that UFC, I have seen it on TV. Hearing Bell's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said, well, what you said counts, but it doesn't count. The Wushu, Taekwondo, Karate you mentioned, in fact, can only be regarded as performance events now. They don't have enough lethality. UFC is a sport, not a wushu. The only high lethality technique you mentioned here may only be regarded as Muay Thai. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bell laughed. Although it is the era of firearms, the armies of various countries, especially the special forces, also attach great importance to fighting skills. For example, I know that the special forces of Huaxia do not practice wushu, but sanda. Among them, the fiercest standing attack is Muay Thai, and the strongest leg attack is Kyokushin karate. Well, this is also a kind of karate, but it is mainly used to knock down the enemy, and its lethality is amazing. Boxing is also a very strong technique, but it does not protect the lower body, so it is not very practical. The ground strangulation fighting skills are mainly divided into two kinds, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Japanese Judo, both of which are based on joint skills, giving people a chance to turn defeat into victory. Seeing Jiang Hai's curious gaze, Bell continued to introduce. He mainly introduced the so-called fighting skills of these countries. Of course, the military version is different from the civilian version. What is the strongest? Hearing Bell's introduction, Jiang Hai's mind slowly sketched out a picture of a fight. The strongest? According to the words of your country's Jack Lee, there is no such thing as the strongest fighting technique, only the strongest grandmaster of combat. Haha, that's a bit of an exaggeration. In fact, there is still a strongest fighting technique in our country. It's the Soviet Russia's Sambo. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bell also became serious and said with a serious face. Sambo. Hearing Bell's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. What is Sambo? To be honest, no matter what he said, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, Muay Thai, Sanda, boxing and so on, he has heard of them, but this Sambo, he really hasn't heard of it. As if seeing Jiang Hai's doubts, Bell here couldn't help but explain to him. Sambo is a fighting skill from Soviet Russia and Europe. It was probably developed in the 1920s to the 1930s. Before that, the strongest fighting skill has always been Mongolian wrestling. In fact, it is the same now, but we can't learn Mongolian wrestling. Let's talk about Sambo first. Belle heard Jiang Hai's words and said slowly, although Sambo is not famous, it has always been famous in the fighting world. Before 1950, Sambo mainly developed in Soviet Russia, and after 50 years, it began to enter the international arena. In 1957, it won 2 games with the Hungarian judo team, 47-1, and won the final victory. It was no longer a game, it was a crushing. 2 years later, it won again in the game with the German judo team. In the early stages of the Olympic Games in Japan, Soviet-Russian Sambo athletes defeated the Czech Olympic judo team with judo rules, and then defeated the judo European champion French team. The Soviet Union was known as the fighting nation, and the Sambo played a significant role in this. The only thing that could contend against the Sambo was the legendary Mongolian wrestling. It consisted of over 300 throwing and kicking techniques, and it was known as the strongest fighting technique on the ancient battlefield. Different from the skills mentioned earlier, Mongolian wrestling is a real killing skill. It is not like the current skills, which are mainly used to subdue opponents. After all, on the ancient battlefield, using fists and kicks to attack is tantamount to self-harm, and fighting on the ground is tantamount to suicide. This is because when you use crucifix on the ground, the enemies around you can easily chop off your head. The most effective way is to throw the enemy to the ground and then finish him off. Therefore, in terms of the excitement of watching, Mongolian wrestling is not good enough, and the arena is not good enough. But in terms of fighting to the death, Mongolian wrestling is the best. In the World Cup of Sambo, the only thing that can compete with Soviet Russia is Mongolian wrestling. They have won 19 championships in total. Their fighting ability is really terrifying. After listening to Belle's introduction, Jiang Hai's eyes became brighter and brighter. Then, are we learning wrestling or Sambo now? Looking at Belle, Jiang Hai asked anxiously. What we are going to learn now is Israeli fighting skills. Looking at the anxious Jiang Hai, Belle chuckled and said slowly, what the hell is that? Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai's face suddenly collapsed. Why did they talk for so long, so lively, and not learn these things? If they don't learn these things, what's the point of talking so much? Boss, I am just a sniper. If it is not necessary, I don't need to fight with the enemy, so I only know this. The main reason why I talk so much to the boss is to tell the boss about the main fighting skills in the world, so that the boss can be prepared. Seeing Jiang Hai's expression, Belle chuckled and said to him, Then okay, Israel it is. Gritting his teeth, it is better than nothing. Jiang Hai is still ready to learn. However, don't be fooled by the fact that Israel's fighting techniques sounded easy to bully. In fact, this fighting technique was also very famous internationally. Israel's fighting techniques were also called Mega. It was a compulsory fighting technique for the Israel Defense Forces, military, and law enforcement forces. At the same time, it was widely used all over the world. It was also a compulsory course for the FBI in the United States. Watching the cool fighting skills and tricks on TV. In fact, most of them are extracted from Israeli fighting skills. This is also a fighting skill that is easy to learn, but difficult to master. According to Belle, the first lesson that everyone in the Delta Rapid Reaction Force had to learn was the basic combat skills from Israel. After mastering this, they would be able to master firearms and driving. After that, they would be assigned to different classes and configurations. Generally speaking, although snipers also know fighting skills, they are not specialized in it. Explosives and ammunitionists are the strongest in fighting, because they are the easiest to fight with the enemy in close quarters, and they also need to use their hands to protect their comrades. Under Belle's guidance, Jiang Hai began to learn from him. All martial arts or whatever, in fact, the beginning is learning. Jiang Hai is the same. You can't expect to become a super master the next day after learning it today. This is unrealistic. Before Jiang Hai started, he always thought that Israeli fighting skills are weak just from the name. He estimated that its combat effectiveness was similar to that of Muay Thai, but after coming into contact with it he found out. In fact, this fighting ring is not as simple as he imagined. Israeli fighting skills can be valued by the world leader of the United States, so naturally, it has its own unique system. This fighting skill is very flexible. It is mainly based on the actual situation to judge the actual fighting style. It has a 360-degree defense, including punches, kicks, grabs, hugs, and joint skills. This surprised Jiang Hai. During the fight with Bell, although Jiang Hai's strength, speed, agility, and stamina were much better than Bell, but after the fight, his best result was that he could only last for about 10 minutes before being defeated. This made Jiang Hai more curious about the fighting skill itself, but at the same time, he was more curious about Bell. After about an hour of learning, Jiang Hai and Bell were a little tired, so they sat on the carpet to rest. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jiang Hai could not help but ask Bell his doubts. Bell, to be honest, your strength is not bad, and you retired from the Delta. I guess that when you retired, there should be a lot of departments looking for you. Why do you want to come back to be a cowboy? With his hands supporting his weight behind his back, Jiang Hai looked at Bell beside him. He was really curious. Oh, why is the boss suddenly so interested in me? I don't like men, haha, I'm just joking. Well, speaking of which, when I first retired from the army, there were indeed a lot of people who came to me, including the FBI, the CIA, the Massachusetts Special Police Force, and the New York Police Department, etc. The treatment was really good. Of course, if you really want to talk about money, it's more of a private nature. Being a bodyguard for those rich people is a very profitable business. Looking at Jiang Hai's ceiling, Bell chuckled and said to Jiang Hai, "Today's second update, continuously delivered." Chapter 59. Hey Bell, I heard that you taught the boss how to fight in the afternoon. How did the boss do? A burst of laughter came from Jiang Hai's villa. Because they fought all afternoon, Jiang Hai was very tired and Bell was also very tired. Jiang Hai offered to give him money, but Bell did not accept it. His goal was an Xbox bought by Jiang Hai. Although this thing is not cheap, it is only a few $100s in the United States. Jiang Hai knew that Bell did this intentionally, so in order to thank him, he was going to treat him to a meal. Later, he thought about it and decided to treat one person or two people. Besides, he doesn't know how to cook. So he called Mrs. Philemon directly and asked Mrs. Philemon to come over as the chef. He treated everyone to a meal. These cowboys didn't learn the word polite from Jiang Hai. As soon as the work was over, they all came over. Everyone was noisy and lively. After chatting for a while, Ai Dehua here led the topic to Jiang Hai's martial arts training this afternoon. Sure enough, after hearing his words, everyone was very concerned about this incident. Wow, a martial arts genius. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Bell said exaggeratedly, "Haha, don't flatter me. I was beaten very badly this afternoon." Hearing Bell's words, Jiang Hai was the first to laugh, shook his head and said helplessly, he was telling the truth. He was thrown at least a dozen times this afternoon. Just starting, before you beat people, you have to learn how to take a beating. This is a compulsory course. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins here also smiled and encouraged Jiang Hai. Hearing what Robbins said, Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded, but his eyes looked at Bell next to him. And Jiang Hai's mind couldn't help but go back to this afternoon when he asked Bell. Indeed, just as Jiang Hai thought, those who retired from the Delta Force, even those who were fired, as long as it wasn't because of a matter of principle, such as treason, they would be very popular. In addition, Bell had actually performed well except for the last time when he disobeyed orders. So when he retired, there were indeed a lot of people who threw him an olive branch. But Bell didn't accept it, because he was tired of wandering and killing people everywhere. In the United States, Jiang Hai, a foreigner, knows the nature of the FBA and CIB, even if he is not an insider. And those police stations, special forces, and the like, low income is one thing, but they also kill people. As for Bell, he was already tired of killing people. Being a bodyguard meant that he would inevitably end up in a firefight. He would rather not have such a life, no matter how much he earned. So in the end, he turned down all his jobs and returned to his hometown to become a cowboy. It turned out that being a cowboy was not bad. He did not have to worry about food and drink. As long as he worked hard, he earned quite a bit. At least, it was enough to support a bachelor like him. Hearing Bell's words, Jiang Hai also lowered his head and smiled, He didn't expect him to be a pacifist. Okay, boys, no matter how happy you are, you have to eat as usual. Come and try my wife's specialty lemon cod. At this moment, Philip's signature laughter interrupted Jiang Hai's contemplation. As he walked out of the kitchen with a plate of cod, a fishy smell, coupled with a slightly sour smell, filled the room. Haha, I can't wait. Looking at the dish, Ai Dehua was the first to eat. He picked up the communal fork, put a piece on his plate, and began to eat in big bites. Eating in the United States is different from eating in China. Here the system is divided. Logically speaking, it should be like a Western restaurant, where each person eats a set of food. Of course, gatherings like this are not too particular. The main food will be placed together on the table, and whoever wants to eat can use the communal fork to put it on their plate. At first, Jiang Hai was not used to this, but now he is used to it. After putting 2 pieces of cod on his plate, Jiang Hai also began to cut and eat. Although Mrs. Philemon was dark and plump, she was a very good cook. According to the local tastes in the United States, she can even go out and set up a small stall. The last time Jiang Hai went to Huaxia City in Boston, there were many small stalls there. Many of them were not as good as Mrs. Phillip's cooking. However, Mrs. Phillip did not have such thoughts. In her opinion, she only needed to take care of the house and make money. This kind of mentality is not rare in the United States. There are many full-time housewives in the United States. Although the people in the United States talk about women's rights every day, according to Jiang Hai's understanding, the women's way of thinking is, if I want to go out and work, you have to agree. If I want to rest at home, you have to take care of my family. Well, perhaps it is a little biased, but the general meaning is not too far off. At least, that is what Jiang Hai thinks. The guests and the host enjoyed the meal. After all, in a sense, these people are also the owners of the manor. After everyone finished eating, everyone took the initiative to help Jiang Hai tidy up, and then left. Jiang Hai also returned to his room. He teased the 2 big dogs and watched TV, but his mind was thinking about the situation when he learned martial arts during the day. The Israeli martial arts seemed to be quite useful. The next morning, Jiang Hai woke up early, which was rare. In fact, on a winter morning, there is nothing more memorable than a warm bed. At least, Jiang Hai thought so before he hugged a girl to sleep. So usually, Jiang Hai usually sleeps until he wakes up naturally. Even if he wakes up, he will stay in bed and play with his mobile phone. He won't get up until about 10 o'clock. But today, he got up at 7 o'clock in the morning, which made the 2 dogs next to him a little uncomfortable. But when Jiang Hai woke up, they also woke up with a yawn. They opened the door and let the 2 dogs go to the toilet. Then, Jiang Hai washed his face and brushed his teeth in the bathroom. He had a simple breakfast, and of course, breakfast for the 2 dogs. After everything was done, Jiang Hai changed into sportswear and walked out of the room. According to Belle, although Jiang Hai's physical fitness was very good, the necessary exercise still needed to be done. Running every morning was not only good for the body, but also good for the lung capacity. Of course, his so-called morning run was at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Jiang Hai woke up at 7 o'clock now. It was almost 8 o'clock when he ran. It was not a morning run. However, Jiang Hai came here mainly to exercise and warm up his body, so he didn't really care about it. Starting from the villa, Jiang Hai ran all the way to the beach. The location of his villa was not far from the beach. He could even clearly see the distant coastline and the golden beach from the 2nd floor. However, there was still a distance to run. On a road that Luo Binsi deliberately opened, Jiang Hai ran to the beach. Luo Binsi didn't stay here for nothing. He paved several roads in the manor. After all, the grass in the manor was a type of forage grass. They grew very tall. When they were at their most luxuriant, they could even grow to waist height. Luo Binsi didn't stay here for nothing. Although it was possible to drive a large vehicle such as a pickup truck, it would be troublesome to walk or drive an all-terrain vehicle. The manor's grass was the main source of food for the livestock. Naturally, it couldn't be cut like a lawn. Therefore, he deliberately opened up several roads in these weeds. They were not very wide, only about 3 meters wide. Only 1 pickup truck could pass through, and 2 all-terrain vehicles could pass through. One of these roads led to the dock, one led to the cowshed, and one led to the plantation, which was the vineyard and the vegetable garden. But after all, Jiang Hai came too late this time, so there were no vegetables in the vegetable garden. He could only wait until next year. There was also another road that led to the gate. Originally, these roads were just some gravel roads. It was impossible to expect Luo Binsi to have the money to pave them. But this time, Jiang Hai renovated the house and left a lot of stone and planks. He put all of them on these roads. Running on these roads was indeed better than running on gravel roads. At least, it was a lot smoother, and he didn't feel panic when stepping on it. Jiang Hai adjusted his breathing while running to the beach at a constant speed. After seeing Jiang Hai run, the two big dogs next to him felt a little strange, but they also ran with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai ran as he walked. Unknowingly, he had already run for more than half an hour. Standing on the soft sand and feeling the biting cold sea breeze, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and prepared himself. Then he began to practice according to what Belle had taught him yesterday. Although the coordination between his hands, eyes, body, technique, and steps was still a little rusty, Jiang Hai's eyes were still a little shaky. Jiang Hai practiced very seriously. He practiced for more than an hour. When it was almost 10 o'clock in the morning, he stopped. Then he rested for a while and continued running in the direction of his home. On the way, he made a turn and went to the cowshed. He mainly wanted to see his big horse and give it some food. After that, he went back to rest. After taking a shower, he went to Mrs. Philemon's house for lunch. In the afternoon, he stayed at home to play on the computer and watch TV. In the evening, he went to eat dinner. Just like that, the day ended peacefully. This kind of life was basically for people in a semi-retired state. For those rich people, rich young people, or even people with gold collars and white collars, this kind of life was too boring. In their eyes, what was the point of staying at home all day? If they had this kind of time, they might as well go out and find some excitement. Nice cars, beautiful women, good wine, good food. There were always things that could stimulate you. But for Jiang Hai, this was his nature. A person was not a fish, so how could he know the joy of a fish? For Jiang Hai, this kind of dull and peaceful life was the most comfortable. Please collect, please collect, please collect. Important things have to be said 3 times. Chapter 60. Congratulations, CEO Chi. You've clinched this deal. An old man with white hair looked at the 2 contracts in front of him, then looked at the woman sitting opposite him. He sighed helplessly, then gritted his teeth, and signed his name on the 2 contracts, as if he had made up his mind. Congratulations to you too. Ueda Technology has now merged with our Chi Group. It will definitely become one of Chi Group's top businesses in the future. Seeing the old man's signature, the beautiful woman sitting opposite him couldn't help but chuckle and say to the old man, "I hope so." The old man sighed and smiled awkwardly. He really didn't know if his decision today was right or wrong. Elder Qin, don't worry. It's not like you haven't seen Director Lu's methods. Yuda will definitely prosper under her leadership. At this moment, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s sat next to him and said with a smile, "Hehe, I don't need you to tell me that. I know CEO Chi's methods better than you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sold Ueda Technology to Chi Group. I have to admit that I'm old now. It's the young people's world now. Oh right, Ueda Technology has been acquired by Chi Group. This is a happy occasion. I'll be hosting a banquet at home tonight. Everyone must come." The old man smiled helplessly, but he quickly composed himself and said to the people sitting there with a smile, "That's what I should do." Hearing the old man's words, the people here laughed. Although Chi Group had acquired 60% of Ueda Technology's shares, it was not originally a listed company. It was a private company. Old man Qin in front of them had 100% of Ueda Technology's shares. Now that he had sold 60%, he still had 40% left. Moreover, if they wanted to hand over the factory and company in good condition, they couldn't do without old man Qin's help. Therefore, they had to attend this banquet. Niece Qi. After making an appointment for the evening, everyone dispersed. Qi Li also left the room with her assistant. She went to the underground car park and was about to drive away. However, before she got into the car, she was stopped by someone. Luli turned around to look, and could not help but smile. The person who called out to her was probably one of her direct subordinates. Niece Chi, you sure walked fast. The person who came was none other than the middle-aged man who had spoken in the meeting room earlier. Uncle Zhao, you're walking too slowly. Why did you stop me? Looking at the middle-aged man in front of her, Chili revealed a rare playful expression, but then she looked at the middle-aged man in front of her seriously and asked. This middle-aged man was called Zhao Jianjun. He knew both Qi Li's family and Jiang Hai's family. They used to live in the same neighborhood, but he was younger than Qi Li's and Jiang Hai's parents by more than 10 years. Later on, Qi Li's father resigned to make money, and he followed him. He could be considered a direct descendant of the Qi family. However, because he was injured when he was young, he couldn't have children. Therefore, he had always treated Qi Li as his own daughter. After such a big incident happened to Lu Li, he was still able to take over the company. Qi Li also approved of Zhao Jianjun. As a matter of fact, Zhao Jianjun was now the vice president of the Qi group. His position in the company was only below Qi Li. It's like this. At the banquet tonight, you have to bring your partner. Do you have anyone in mind? Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhao Jianjun smiled and asked Qi Li. Hearing his words, Qi Li was stunned. Just bring Yijin. Haven't we lived like this for so many years? Hearing Zhao Jianjun's words, Qi Li asked curiously. Hearing what she said, the girl with glasses beside her couldn't help but look at Zhao Jianjun. If Jiang Hai knows about this, it's fine. If he doesn't, and you always ignore his existence, your reputation will be damaged. Although I know that the marriage with Jiang Hai was a temporary measure, it's not good for you or him if you keep delaying it. After all, I watched Jiang Hai grow up. It's not good for both of you. If you feel that you can get along with Jiang Hai, then you can give it a try. If you feel that you can't get along with Jiang Hai, then you can divorce him at any time. If you feel that you can't talk to your mother, I can help you talk to her. Looking at Qi Li in front of him, Zhao Jianjun said with some hesitation. What is Jiang Hai's identity? How can he be worthy of the president? However, as soon as Zhao Jianjun finished speaking, Qi Li's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. She really didn't think that Zhao Jianjun wanted to talk to her about this. Seeing Qi Li's hesitant eyes, before she could speak, the assistant behind her had already spoken. You shut up. No matter what Jiang Hai's identity is, at least now he is Qi Li's husband. You can't judge him. Hearing the girl's words, Zhao Jianjun frowned and said with a face of displeasure. He had long felt that there was something wrong with this little girl. She was so hostile to Jiang Hai. Could it be that she has a psychological problem? Uncle Zhao is right. I told you that Jiang Hai is my husband. It's not up to you to judge him. Well, Uncle Zhao, I think I understand. I will consider it. Turning back and scolding the assistant next to her, Qi Li turned her head and said to Zhao Jianjun. Zhao Jianjun looked at Qi Li. He didn't know if she really listened to him. But no matter what, as her uncle, he had already said so much. Whether it would work or not, it still depended on the two parties. Take care of yourself. With a sigh, Zhao Jianjun didn't say much. After nodding to Qi Li, he turned and left. After watching Zhao Jianjun leave, Qi Li also walked into the Maybach parked next to them. The driver had been waiting for a long time. After the two got in the car, he started the engine and headed to the company in the city center. Has Jiang Hai contacted me recently? If Zhao Jianjun hadn't mentioned it today, Qi Li might have almost forgotten her husband in name. But now after listening to Zhao Jianjun's words, she also felt that it was time to change her attitude. Indeed, when they got married, the person Qi Li loved in her heart was not Jiang Hai. As Zhao Jianjun said, it was just a stopgap measure. Of course, the person she loved in her heart was not the person she used to love. After all, that fellow was the one who had caused the death of her father. Furthermore, he had nearly caused the destruction of her family. This hatred had long destroyed the original appreciation and love. Husband and wife were birds in the same forest. When disaster came, they flew away separately. Not to mention that the two were not husband and wife, so she could be regarded as a period of complete idleness for more than a year. Every day, She was afraid that she would think of her father and remember the wrong things she had done. So she had been working hard to make herself forget about love. But after Zhao Jianjun mentioned it today, she couldn't help but want to change. Of course, she still didn't have any good feelings for Jiang Hai. But she wasn't going to kick Jiang Hai away directly. She was going to give Jiang Hai a subsidiary company and let him prove his value. If Jiang Hai really met the standard in her heart, this life, it was not impossible to continue like this. If Jiang Hai couldn't do it, she could just separate the subsidiary company at that time as compensation for Jiang Hai. No matter what, the two were childhood sweethearts. It was not very nice to treat him like this. No, since he made a phone call more than 2 months ago, there has been no news. Hearing Qi Li's words, although there was some disgust in her heart, the assistant next to her still replied with certainty. This guy hasn't called me for almost 3 months? What did he do? Really, give me the phone. Hearing what the assistant said, Qi Li frowned. Sometimes women were like this. If you were too enthusiastic, she would hate you. If you stayed far away from her and gave up on her, she would feel uncomfortable. After taking the phone from the assistant's hand, Qi Li looked at the familiar and unfamiliar number on the screen. After hesitating for a moment, she called. The phone rang about 10 times before it was picked up, but the voice was very dull. Hello. Listening to the weak voice on the other side of the phone, Qi Li's frown deepened. Really, mud can't support a wall. Hello, this is Qi Li. It's already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Are you still sleeping? Qi Li said to the other side of the phone in a deep voice. Qi Li, I'm going to faint. Why did you think of calling me? Listening to the slightly unfamiliar voice on the other side, Jiang Hai couldn't help but rub his head. He got up from the bed and gestured to the 2 dogs lying by the door to continue sleeping. Jiang Hai turned on the bedside lamp. There was a 13-hour time difference between the eastern United States and the imperial capital. In other words, it was now 1 o'clock in the afternoon in the imperial capital, but it was exactly 12 o'clock in the middle of the night in Jiang Hai's place. Don't worry about that for now. Send me your ID number, and I'll book the earliest flight for you. I just made a deal, and the other party is having a family dinner tonight. I need you to accompany me. Listening to Jiang Hai's somewhat dull voice, Qi Li said quickly. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It looks like you didn't go home to take a look, but forget it. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's a good idea for the 2 of us to keep relying on each other like this. I'm very grateful that you lent me 400,000 yuan when my family needed money. I've recently earned the money back and left it at home. There's also a divorce agreement that I've already signed. If you have time, you can go back and sign it. It'll take effect then. Leaning on the bed, Jiang Hai laughed at himself. He really didn't know how this woman thought of him. But anyway, it was time for him to make it clear. But there was something strange in his heart. If Qi Li didn't sign it, then wasn't he not divorced yet? But when he applied for a green card in the United States, it clearly stated that he was divorced. What kind of trick was this? In fact, he also underestimated the immigration unit in the United States. As long as you have money, a secret marriage? A secret marriage would let you live. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Today's second update is continuously delivered. Please collect it, please collect it, please collect it. Such an important thing. Please remember it in your heart. Chapter 61. 400,000? Where did you get 400,000? Did you rob someone? Divorce agreement? I know you're unhappy, but if you think you can get hold of my weakness like this, then I'll tell you clearly that you're thinking too much. If there's anything, let's talk face to face. Now immediately take a plane to the capital. Listening to Jiang Hai's words on the phone, Qi Li frowned deeply. She thought of many possibilities after this call. The most likely one was that Jiang Hai listened to her and came over. Otherwise, it was also possible that Jiang Hai was in a bad mood and was throwing a little tantrum. But in front of her, these were useless. But Jiang Hai was ruthless this time. He directly took drastic measures. 400,000? Where did he get 400,000? Not to mention 400,000. Jiang Hai probably didn't even have 40,000. Sigh. You're still so arrogant. But forget it, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. After all, you helped me when I needed money the most. If it's possible in the future, we can still be friends. As for what you said, I really can't go to the capital now. I don't have a direct flight to the capital. Listening to Chi Li's tough words, Jiang Hai really wanted to scold her directly. Now immediately, who do you think you are? But thinking of how she helped him when he needed money the most, he just rubbed his temples and continued to speak slowly. But obviously, Chi Li didn't seem to listen to Jiang Hai's words now. You're not in Bingqing? Then where are you? Tell me. I'll send someone to pick you up. Taking a deep breath, Chi Li suppressed her anger and said to Jiang Hai, no matter what method or how much effort she had to put in, she must see Jiang Hai today. Me? I'm in Boston now, so even if I get on the plane now, I definitely won't be able to arrive today. And for now, I don't want to see you, so that's it. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Listening to Chi Li's tough words, Jiang Hai sighed. This woman's character was really vile. Since she didn't believe what he said, then so be it. Jiang Hai didn't want to say more, so he hung up the phone and turned it off. Listening to the dead tone on the other side of the phone, Chi Li was also stunned. He actually dared to hang up on me. How dare he hang up on me? How dare you lie to me that you are not in Bing City anymore, and are in Boston? Jiang Hai, you're dead meat. Chi Li pointed at the phone in her hand. This was the first time in her life that someone had hung up on her. What did Jiang Hai mean by that? Did he mean that she was dumped? How could this guy, how could he dare to be like this? She immediately called back, but unfortunately, the other party's phone was turned off. After calling more than a dozen times, she finally understood that Jiang Hai had either blacklisted her or turned off his phone. Phew, this damn guy. He slammed his fist on the driver's seat in front of him, scaring the driver in front of him. Fortunately, the driver of such a big company naturally knew what to say. Now, he just needed to shut up and focus on driving. As for Chi Li, she was already flipping through her phone book, and then she found another phone number and called it. Not long after, a girl's excited voice came from the other side of the phone. Jiang Hai and Chi Li knew this girl. She was their junior high school and elementary school classmate, and she was the class monitor. But after Chi Li's family became rich, this was the first time she called her. Hey Xiaoli, why did you call me? It's such a surprise. Listening to the excited female voice on the other side of the phone, Chi Li's self-esteem, which was hurt by Jiang Hai, recovered a little. She adjusted her breathing, smiled, and talked to the other side of the phone. After exchanging greetings for a while, she asked to know the phone numbers of Jiang Hai's friends. Chi Li had met Jiang Hai's friends, Fu Yuan and Xiang Hua. After all, they had a wedding in Bing City, so she had met them, but she didn't know their phone numbers. She should be able to get it if she asked this elementary school classmate. Fu Yuan and Xiang Hua liked to join in the fun. Their mentality was different from Jiang Hai's, so they had contact with their junior high school, university, and even elementary school classmates. After asking this girl, Chi Li also got Fu Yuan and Xiang Hua's phone numbers. Then, he called Fu Yuan because he was more reliable than Xiang Hua. With a burst of ringtone, the phone was also connected. When the phone was connected, Fu Yuan was still a little confused, because they didn't know who this was. But when Chi Li said who she was, he couldn't help but be stunned. I want to ask, where is Jiang Hai? Listening to Fu Yuan's stressful voice, Chi Li asked with a cold face. He is in Boston. Listening to Chi Li's words, Fu Yuan didn't even hesitate and said directly. He was very sure that Jiang Hai was in Boston, because although Jiang Hai was now in the United States, his contact with China had not been cut off. Of course, he was mainly in contact with his friends. Every day, he would post photos of himself playing on the ranch, on the beach, on various guns, on various cars, and on various delicacies to show off. But every time he would get some middle fingers and scolding. But Jiang Hai knew that these were all bad friends, and they were not malicious. Of course, they also knew that they couldn't joke too much. But Fu Yuan looked at Jiang Hai's heavenly life, and was already thinking about whether to go to the United States to fight local tycoons. Are you sure he is in Boston? What is he doing in Boston? Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Qi Li's sixth sense told her that Fu Yuan was not lying. That is to say, Jiang Hai is really in Boston? He opened a manor there, raised a lot of cows and a beach. He eats lobsters and steaks every day. By the way, you are his wife, don't you know? When Fu Yuan heard Qi Li's words, he subconsciously said in an envious tone. But halfway through, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. This Qi Li is Jiang Hai's wife. How can she not know this? Cough, I have been busy recently. He has a manor there. Did someone invest in him or what? Are you sure it is his? With a dry cough, a trace of embarrassment flashed across Qi Li's face, and she continued to ask Fu Yuan. Of course it is his. When he came back, he said that he seemed to have gone somewhere to pick up some gems, and then sold them for hundreds of millions. TSK. That manor was bought by him with the money he earned from selling gems. I thought you knew about it. Why don't you know? Listening to Qi Li's words over there, Fu Yuan smiled awkwardly. Did Jiang Hai run away by himself? Oh, if that's the case, I understand. Sorry to trouble you. Listening to Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai's miraculous encounter, Qi Li couldn't convince herself. Originally, she wanted to give him some chances, but she didn't expect that guy to kick her out a few months ago and run to the United States to be the owner of a manor. This is too infuriating. Boss, we are here. As Qi Li hung up the phone, the driver sitting in front hesitated and said to the back, Sorry to trouble you, old Li. Let's go to the airport now. After hesitating for a moment, Qi Li didn't get out of the car, but spoke directly to the driver in front of her. In any case, she couldn't believe that Jiang Hai, who needed her help a few months ago, had so many things happen in these 2 months. Even if Fu Yuan said it was true, she didn't believe it. But if she wanted to go to Boston to find Jiang Hai, she didn't have so much time. Secondly, she didn't know where Jiang Hai was in Boston. It was not easy for a foreigner like her to find someone abroad. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, so she planned to go back to Bing City first. Okay. Hearing Qi Li's words, the driver nodded, started the engine, and rushed in the direction of the airport. When she arrived at the airport, she bought the latest flight to Bing City and took the plane directly to Bing City. When she arrived at Bing City, someone from the branch had already prepared the car, and she went straight home. When she opened the door of the house, she was stunned because at this time, in the house she shared with Jiang Hai, it seemed that no one had lived there for a long time. There was a thick layer of dust on the ground, and no one had come back for at least a few months. Is what that guy said true? Looking at the thick layer of dust in the house, Qi Li walked into the house quickly. Following Jiang Hai's instructions, she came to the main wedding room, which she had only stayed in for one night. She opened the bottom of the bed and found that there were 40 piles of neatly stacked RMB, and even the smell of ink on them had not dissipated. On top of these piles of money, there was a file bag. Picking up the file bag, Qi Li looked at it. When she saw the large divorce agreement, written on it, and Jiang Hai's signature at the back, she felt that she couldn't stop crying. She didn't know why she was like this now. Grievance? There must be. But in addition to grievance, there was also a trace of anger, a trace of madness, and a trace of regret. If she had changed her attitude toward Jiang Hai earlier, she didn't know if he would still leave like this. But no matter what, it was too late now. Now she really wanted to pick up the pen and sign her name on it. From now on, she had nothing to do with this guy. But it was difficult for her to ask her assistant next to her to pass her the pen. I won't let you get what you want. Looking at the agreement in front of her, Qi Li gritted her teeth and said angrily. Then she put the agreement back into the file bag and patted it to her assistant next to her. Keep it for me. Absolutely never, ever lose it. Put it in my cabinet for me. After that, Qi Li quickly left the room, took the car downstairs and returned to the capital. She would not forget that she still had a banquet in the evening. Today's first and second updates were delivered consecutively. Chapter 62. Hey old Jiang, what's the matter with you? You went abroad, didn't you tell your wife? She called me directly. At about 8 o'clock in the morning, Jiang Hai woke up from his sleep. He had to admit that although he was disturbed last night, He was in a good mood when he went to bed. After all, the matter between him and Chi had finally come to an end. But as soon as he turned on the phone, he found a string of missed calls. Some of them were from Chi, and some were from Fu Yuan. Jiang Hai wasn't going to return Chi's call, but he still had to return Fu Yuan's call. Then he turned on the phone and called back. But as soon as the call was connected, Fu Yuan began to roar. Listening to Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help rubbing his head and chuckling. I divorced her. After hearing Fu Yuan's roar, Jiang Hai said slowly, Divorced? Why? Didn't you just get married for less than a year? You divorced just like that? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan couldn't help but be stunned, and then he said strangely, our marriage at the beginning was actually a mistake. Jiang Hai on the other side of the phone scratched his head and said helplessly. Then he briefly talked about his marriage with Chi. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan on the other side of the phone was silent. He now felt that it was very melodramatic. Do you think this is an 8 o'clock TV drama? But looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, it didn't seem like he was lying. So he was also a little speechless. If that's the case, then let's divorce. It's not a good thing to be together, and we can't always make do with each other. By the way, are you reliable? I have a 15-day holiday during the new year. Don't lie to me. I'm really going to beat up the local tycoons. After hesitating, Fu Yuan said this, but then he changed the topic. He watched Jiang Hai showing off in his circle of friends every day. It was impossible for him not to be envious, but deep in his heart, he was happy for his bad friend. However, a feeling was one thing. It didn't mean that he wouldn't come over to beat up the tycoons. No problem, I'm fine. Anyway, I have nothing to do when I go back during Chinese New Year. If you want to come, then come. Ask them if they want to come. You can take care of the plane tickets, and the rest is mine. Jiang Hai was now considered rich, so he naturally said directly. In fact, for Jiang Hai, even the plane ticket was not much money. But he understood that if he did not let his friends pay some money, they would not be willing to come no matter what. So he let them pay a few thousand yuan for the plane ticket. Okay, then I'll apply for a visa and book a flight ticket. I'll see which day is cheaper and book it. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan said with a smile. After a few more words, Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan hung up the phone. After hanging up the phone, Jiang Hai took a deep breath, but the corners of his mouth cracked open. This kind of life was not bad. I'm in a good mood, go exercise. Looking at the two dogs running in circles, Jiang Hai walked over, grabbed the meat on the heads of the two big dogs, and said with a smile, then changed into sportswear and went downstairs. Following the flat land next to the villa, Jiang Hai ran towards the sea. Not long after, he had already seen the existence of the dock in the distance. But at this time, there was some noise on the dock that was usually empty. Jiang Hai fixed his eyes and found that it was Ai Dehua and Philip. They were pushing an open boat out of the dock. After seeing Jiang Hai from afar, the two couldn't help but stop and wave at Jiang Hai. Hey boss, you've been quite diligent recently. You're even running. Seeing Jiang Hai running over, Ai Dehua said with a smile. This is not an exercise, what are you doing? Going out to sea? Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then looked at the two people in front of him curiously and asked them. Well, we're going out to sea. The weather is good today. I want to check the situation of the creatures in the sea here, the population and the number. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dehua also nodded slightly and said with a look of approval. Oh, then wait for me, I'll go too. The open boat that Jiang Hai bought can seat 8 people at the same time. It is one of the largest open boats. Adding him is not a problem at all. And the most important thing is that since coming here, Jiang Hai really hasn't taken a speedboat out to sea. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dehua also laughed. That's not a problem, but there's no need to rush. We need to test the water around here first. We need to put down some nets to see the underwater situation around here and make preparations. We'll only go out to sea in the afternoon. You can come back after lunch. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dehua said with a light smile. The boss wants to go out to sea. He naturally won't refuse. Okay, then I'll run back first. Hearing that they will leave in the afternoon, Jiang Hai was relieved. After saying goodbye to Ai Dehua, he turned and ran toward another road. On the way, he unconsciously accelerated his speed. Speaking of which, although Jiang Hai already has a large sea area, to be exact, it's his private fishing ground. But he has bought this manor for nearly 2 months. But he hasn't gone out to sea even once. It's impossible to say that he doesn't have any regrets. But today, when it comes to going out to sea, it is impossible for Jiang Hai not to be excited. Even his pace is much lighter than before. Not long after, he came to the second stop on his running route, the horse shed and cow shed. In the horse shed, everything is normal. Jiang Hai fed his big horse. Although Jiang Hai hasn't named the horse yet, he hasn't bought a matching saddle, let alone riding it. Although the Shire horse is too heavy and can't run fast, it can still trot and walk without problems. But Jiang Hai hasn't ridden it, mainly because of the problem of the saddle. Because this horse is much bigger than an ordinary horse, all saddles need to be specially made. Even if you go to the town, you can't buy a ready-made one. But fortunately, Luo Binsi said that he can make a saddle. When he is not too busy recently, he can make one. So Jiang Hai has never ridden a horse, but his relationship with the horse is obviously good. And this horse is kept in the horse shed, with Jiang Hai feeding it every day. The horse's size and body are improving day by day. Not only is its brain like little Yellow and Xiaobai, but it is also getting smarter and smarter. Even its muscles and bones are getting better and better. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, if he wants to ride this horse in the future, it is estimated that it will be much faster than an ordinary Shire horse. Of course, this is just Jiang Hai's idea. No one knows the specifics. You eat more. When the time comes, I will ride on you and be awe-inspiring. Jiang Hai stuffed a handful of grass with his blood and put it in the horse trough. He looked at the big horse in front of him and whispered. The big horse also snorted and ate with all its might. Jiang Hai's blood has a huge attraction to creatures, and horses are no exception. Now Jiang Hai can produce 8 scales a day. 2 of them are kept, and the remaining 6 are turned into 2 drops of blood to nourish the pasture. The effect is quite good for now. It is already winter. When spring comes next year, his pasture will be unusually lively. Just as Jiang Hai is full of hope for his future, he suddenly heard the cry of a cow coming from the cowshed in front of him. There are also some people shouting, which really startled Jiang Hai. What's the situation? Hearing these shouts, Jiang Hai immediately threw the rest of the grass into the horse trough, and then quickly ran over. Fortunately, the horse shed and cowshed are next to each other. After turning a corner, Jiang Hai has already arrived in front of the cowshed. At this time, he saw that outside the cowshed, several people were fighting with a big cow. Jiang Hai remembered this cow. It was a cow he bought from an auction. At that time, this cow was not small, but because the cowshed was too smelly, Jiang Hai did not see it again. However, he still has some impression of it. At this time, 5 or 6 men in blue uniforms were holding a rope and pulling the cow hard. As for Luo Binsi and the others, they just stood to the side with a trace of anxiety in their eyes. Seeing the chaos in front of him, Jiang Hai was also a little anxious and shouted for the first time, "Stop! What are you doing?" Boom 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 boom. Hearing Jiang Hai's roar, the others didn't do anything, but the 2 dogs at his feet ran and barked. It was said that dogs that bite don't bark, but Jiang Hai didn't hold water here. The 2 dogs that Jiang Hai raised now barked, because Jiang Hai told them not to bite people casually. If the people on the opposite side were really a threat to Jiang Hai, it was estimated that these 2 dogs would be the most ruthless. Ugh! Seeing Jiang Hai and these 2 dogs appear, the staff here were shocked. Jiang Hai was fine, but these 2 dogs were really a bit too scary. For a while, they couldn't help but stop their hands, but they didn't dare to let go. Instead, they looked helplessly at the distance. There were 3 people there. The leader was a white man who looked to be in his 30s. Behind him, there was a man and a woman who looked very young. At this time, the man was holding a laptop and recording something. As for the woman, she was holding a camera to record something. "What are you doing? Let go." Seeing that these people didn't let go after hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but come over and pull the people in front of him away. But Jiang Hai was one step ahead of Luo Binci and stopped him. "Boss, these people are from Cartwright Company." Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Luo Binci said quickly in Jiang Hai's ear. "Cartwright? What do you mean? No matter what company they are from, you just want to watch them mess with our cattle?" Hearing Luo Binci's words, Jiang Hai waved his hand and said with a look of displeasure. "Cartwright Company is the largest livestock company around here. It can be said that whether our cattle can be sold or not is related to them. Today's second update, continuously delivered." Chapter 63. Biggest. Isn't my place the biggest? And whether my cattle can be sold or not has something to do with the quality of my cattle. It has nothing to do with them. Hearing Burke Dollar's words, Jiang Hai said with a look of displeasure. "Indeed, in terms of land, your place is the largest private manor, but if you want to sell cattle, you have to ask if our Cartwright Company agrees." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, a man in his 30s with glasses came over with a sneer and said arrogantly to Jiang Hai in front of him. Seeing his appearance, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and walked up to him. "Boss, this is the case." Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to be about to have a conflict with the other party, Robbins immediately came to Jiang Hai's side and quickly whispered in his ear. Speaking of the size of the manor, Jiang Hai's manor was #1 in the entire state of Massachusetts, or even the entire east coast of the United States. However, this Cartwright Company wasn't a place to raise cattle. To be exact, it was a place to sell cattle. It was an animal husbandry company registered in the United States, headquartered in New York. It was one of the more influential animal husbandry companies in the United States. However, they did not raise cattle. They only bought and sold cattle. They were also commonly known as second-hand dealers. In the United States, there were 3 main ways to sell cattle. The first was to sell it normally. Every year, the Meat Quality Inspection Agency would conduct 2 spot checks on the registered ranches. If the meat passed, it could be sold on the market. However, the beef sold this way was basically whole, so it couldn't be sold for much. The cost of raising a cow was about $1,500, and the price of a cow was about $1,000. An adult cow was sold by the pound, so it could only be sold for between $3,000 to $4,000. The profit wasn't much. There is also the second way, which is to go out and run the business yourself. The manor owner has his own distribution channel. After the inspection, he can sell it directly to some big shopping malls or Western restaurants, which is naturally the most profitable. But whether it was Robbins or Burke Dollar, these people did not have such ability. They were good at raising cattle, but when it came to selling they were far behind. Therefore, they chose the third path, which was to participate in some beef cattle competitions or exhibitions. If there was a businessman interested in the beef during the competition or exhibition, he would naturally come to inspect it, and then buy the beef. However, such a large-scale exhibition was actually a game for the rich. Those cows were basically the cows of large companies, not small ranchers. In other words, these cows were actually raised by small ranchers, but if they wanted to sell them at a high price and go to an exhibition, they would need to be affiliated with a large company. Not to mention whether a small ranch would be able to enter the exhibition or the competition, just the amount of money required to participate in the exhibition, and the competition was not small. Therefore, most cowboys and ranchers would choose this path. As for this cow, according to the other party's statement, they need to know the quality of the cows here. In fact, this cow was just a free meal for them. Hearing Luo Binci's words, Jiang Hai's face turned even uglier. This was somewhat similar to the mechanism in China. Everyone raised their cattle freely, and then sold them together. However, at this time, the company that sold the cattle in the United States had become this company. In fact, it was a second-hand dealer, but it was the largest second-hand dealer. Yes, if it was successful, the price of the cattle would be higher, but Jiang Hai's ranch would become the other party's beef cattle base. The distribution channel would be completely controlled by the other party. Rabinci and the others could not be blamed for this, because their original layout was only so big. They did not consider the idea of participating in the exhibition themselves. Firstly, it seemed very expensive to them. Secondly, they did not think that their cows were different. Anyway, the price was about the same. It was better to directly put the cattle under the name of these companies. This would save a lot of trouble. Although they had sacrificed a cow, compared to the nearly 20,000 cows left, one cow was really not a big deal. But Jiang Hai would be the first to disagree with this idea. The distribution channel aside, the most important thing was that the cattle raised by Jiang Hai were different from ordinary cattle. He was almost done improving all the pasture in the manor. As long as this winter passed, when it was time to slaughter next summer and autumn, the quality of these cattle would inevitably be the highest. He was quite confident in his cattle. At this time, if he did not earn the money himself, why should he let others earn it? How could he agree? So after hearing Robin's words, he directly got rid of Robin's and came to these people. Let go of the cow for me, or I will call the police. Looking at the staff in front of him, Jiang Hai pointed with his right hand and said with an unhappy face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the workers here were even more confused. As for Robins and others, although they were somewhat puzzled by Jiang Hai's approach, after all, they were now working under Jiang Hai, so they did not say anything and stood behind Jiang Hai. That momentum, without being angry, made the people on the opposite side even more at a loss. Hey, you have to think about it. If you affiliate with our company, at least you. Seeing the actions of Jiang Hai and others, the man over there couldn't help but walk to the front of Jiang Hai and said with a playful face. In his view, Jiang Hai was just a hothead. When he saw that his cattle were about to be taken away, he was a little reluctant. He did not believe that a manor owner could fight against their company. Get lost. No matter what, our cattle don't need to be affiliated with your company. What kind of company are you? What kind of bullshit exhibition is this? I can't participate in it myself. I don't need you. However, before this person could finish his words, Jiang Hai had already waved his hand impatiently, directly interrupting his words, then said with a look of displeasure. You have to know that it costs money to participate in the exhibition. A booth costs millions of dollars. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people here couldn't help but speak loudly. Millions of dollars were indeed a lot, and Jiang Hai was also short of money now. But at this time, he could lose anything but face, right? I just bought this manor, $280 million. Do you think $1 or $2 million is a big deal? Looking at the man in front of him mockingly, Jiang Hai's words were full of provocation. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people here couldn't help but swallow the rest of their words. Indeed, he was also clear about the size and situation of this manor. Such a large manor, together with the grassland, winery and fishery, $280 million was not expensive, but it was definitely not cheap either. In other words, the current Jiang Hai was a billionaire, with a net worth of over $100 million. It was indeed a bit exaggerated for a small staff member to talk about money in front of him. It seemed that this guy was not as easy to fool as he thought. Okay, you're rich, but don't forget that you can participate in the exhibition yourself. But if you can't sell it, you can't blame anyone else. Let's go. When it came to money, he definitely couldn't win against Jiang Hai. After all, the market value of his company was only a little more than $1 billion. If the company went head-to-head with Jiang Hai naturally couldn't compete with the company. But why should the company go head-to-head with Jiang Hai for such a small person like him? If the company knew that he had a feud with a billionaire, the possibility of the company firing him was much higher than the possibility of winning back their face. So now he can only say some harsh words, then turn around and leave. However, his harsh words weren't just for show. He really did have some ways to deal with Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai wants to participate in the exhibition, then it might be troublesome. This was because this company was mainly responsible for the northeast corner of the United States, north to Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, and even New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, and even Washington, D.C. More than 80% of the merchants in these states had connections with this company. If the quality of the meat was inferior, these merchants might not give Green Forest a chance. Giving face to this company wasn't a bad thing for them. Although the people in the United States only cared about profits, favors were sometimes useful. Of course, if Green Forest's meat wasn't as good as normal meat, then there was no need to compete. However, Jiang Hai was quite confident in his beef. These guys were just waiting to be slapped in the face. If his meat was much better than this company's, these merchants weren't fools. It was needless to say who they would choose. Boss. Seeing these people leave, Harriman took the lead and pulled the cows back to the cowshed. It was obvious that he was distressed just now. As for Robbins, he was 30% guilty and 70% anxious. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and wanted to say something. You don't have to say anything. You have to have some confidence in your cows. Even if you don't have confidence in the cows, you have to have confidence in me, the boss. Do you understand? Our cows will definitely be the best. Waving his hand, Jiang Hai interrupted Robbins and said firmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins couldn't help but smile awkwardly. He really wanted to ask where Jiang Hai's confidence came from, but he couldn't say it out loud. After all, Jiang Hai was the boss. If he had confidence, then they should have confidence as well. When is the exhibition they mentioned? No longer caring about Robin's guilt, Jiang Hai turned his head and asked $1. He definitely couldn't bear to let Jiang Hai sell his cows at the price of adult cows. The biggest difference between him and other billionaires was that he didn't have any connections. To be exact, he was just a nouveau riche. He didn't have the social circle of the upper class at all. After he became rich, he invested in his own business. He didn't have the leisure time to go to New York to make friends with those people. He didn't want to be involved in all the scheming all the time. Therefore, the second path was not feasible. He could only follow these people and take the third path, which was to go to the exhibition. Today's update was a little late because of some things. It will be sent immediately. Chapter 64. The most recent one should be in 2 months after the new year. It's mainly focused on beef cattle from Massachusetts and a few small states nearby. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bell took out his mobile phone and checked it in the distance. This one is too small. Is there a big one? Hearing Bell's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. This one is indeed too small. And most importantly, Jiang Hai is not sure if the quality of the meat can reach that level after feeding it for 3 months. So he hesitated and decided to postpone it. Also in April, there will be a large national exhibition in New York. At that time, livestock companies from all over the country will come. But the price of this promotion spot is also very expensive. Bell looked at it and said with some hesitation. When the person said that renting an exhibition hall would cost millions, he was referring to a small exhibition, like the one in January. After all, Jiang Hai only has 20,000 cows. 20,000 cows is not a small number in the local area. But if it is spread across the country, it is far from enough. Especially when compared with the farmers in the West, the difference is really too big. In Texas, New Mexico, Montana, and other places, 20,000 cows? That is the beginner level. But even if there are fewer cows, Jiang Hai will probably want to rent an exhibition hall. And that will be very expensive. The price of an exhibition hall is conservatively estimated to be less than 10 million. And that is to say that the exhibition hall is closer to the center. Then it will be it. After calculating, there is still half a year. Jiang Hai estimated that he should have the opportunity. He can now grow 8 scales a day. There is a voice in the dark telling him that the lowest level snake needs 1,080 scales to evolve. 8 scales a day. And it only takes 135 days, 4.5 months. Not to mention, Jiang Hai's body was not without scales. He originally had more than 100 scales, and recently, he can store 2 scales a day, which is almost 200 scales. He estimated that in less than 3 months, he should be able to evolve for the first time. At that time, his body will probably have a lot of changes. If he can't do it, he will go into the sea to fish for treasures to sell. Of course, this was only what he thought. According to his original estimation, he would not enter the deep sea until he reached level 3. But at that time, if it really didn't work, he would have to fight for it. But to be honest, it was better not to fight for it. So, Jiang Hai still hoped to find a way to make some money. He didn't need to think about the cattle for the time being. This was something that could make a lot of money in the future. If he sold it now, it wouldn't be worth it. But fish was a good opportunity. Since he was going out to sea in the afternoon, he might as well take a look at the nearby fish resources. By the way, boss, we're almost out of meat. When are we going to replenish our stock? Just as Jiang Hai was whispering there, Luo Binci suddenly remembered something and said to Jiang Hai, in the United States, for a manor owner like Jiang Hai, it was inevitable that food and accommodation were provided, especially beef. However, even if each person consumed 3 pounds of beef per day, it was impossible to eat it every day. In the manor, excluding Philip's wife, they consumed 21 pounds of beef per day. An adult Angus cow weighed 700 to 900 kilograms, which was about 1,800 pounds. In total, 65% of the meat was edible. In fact, in Jiang Hai's opinion, the beef heart, tripe, and tendons were also edible. But the people in the United States didn't eat these things. Just the meat alone, 65% of the slaughter rate meant that there were 1,170 pounds of beef left. Based on the daily consumption of 21 pounds of beef, it could last for 55 days. But it was impossible for them to eat this thing every day. They would get tired of it. So, after killing a cow, it was no problem to supply Jiang Hai and the others for 2 months. In a year, there were only 6 cows. For the base of tens of thousands, it was really a drop in the ocean. So eating meat here was a difficult thing. There is no meat. Then what are we going to buy? Just pick one and kill it. Hearing Luo Binci's words, Jiang Hai didn't even think about it and directly said, "Ugh, weren't you reluctant just now?" Hearing Jiang Hai's understatement, Robbins couldn't help but be stunned. Then he asked strangely, "He was reluctant just now, why did he agree to kill it now?" "I'm reluctant to give it to outsiders. It doesn't matter if we eat it ourselves. By the way, leave the cucumber strips to me." Rolling his eyes at Robbins, Jiang Hai said faintly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins was also stunned. "Just cucumber strips? Don't you want meat?" Hearing Robbins' question, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stop his footsteps. Seeing Jiang Hai's clueless look, Robbins smiled. His boss really didn't look like a boss, but fortunately he had time now. He was going to teach Jiang Hai to recognize these cows. Jiang Hai also felt that as a manor owner, it was a bit shameful that he couldn't even distinguish between cow and meat. So he picked up a mask and walked in with Robbins. The two only knew the cows, so it didn't matter. They didn't need to go too far. The meat on the cow can be divided into 10 pieces in addition to the minced meat. This is the beef neck. It has both fat and lean meat. The meat is dry, but the texture of the meat is very messy, so it can't be sold for a price. It is most suitable to be used as stuffing. Most of the beef meatballs are from here. Robbins walked to the front of a cow, patted the cow's neck, and said to Jiang Hai, "After the beef neck, it is the beef shoulder. The meat of the beef shoulder is also good. The texture is very smooth and tender, but because it is composed of 2 cross pieces of meat, it is more chewy. It is suitable for stewing, roasting, and braising. It needs to be completely roasted before the taste can enter." After the beef neck, Robbins patted the shoulder of the cow behind the beef neck and said to Jiang Hai, "In fact, most of the beef they bought was from here." After the beef neck, it is the upper brain. The meat here is also one of the most expensive meat. It is easy to have marbling patterns, so when it is sold, the meat here is also very valuable. However, the fat is thick, and the pattern is not too obvious. It is suitable for frying and roasting. Oh yes, the people in Huaxia City also eat the beef here in the pot. You seem to call it hot pot. After the upper brain, it is the eye meat. The meat here, if butchered, will look like an eye. The fat is mixed and marbled. It is also the place where the meat is the thinnest and the highest selling price. After the eye meat, it is the outer rib. Most of the meat here is sold to restaurants. In the restaurant, sirloin steak refers to this kind of meat. Below is the tenderloin, which is usually made into beef tenderloin. Of course, the filet mignon in Western restaurants is made with this. Below is the beef brisket, which can be stewed and eaten. Behind is the hip meat, which is the cucumber strip, boss said. The meat here is okay for roasting, and the rest is general. At the front, there is a piece of meat at the breast, and the hind leg is the tendon meat. Robin's introduced to Jiang Hai while touching the beef. Hearing Robin's introduction, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be surprised. He used to think that cucumber strips were the best. After all, cucumber strips were the most expensive in domestic supermarkets. So he took it for granted that cucumber strips might be the tenderloin. But he didn't expect that he couldn't even touch the edge of the spine. The best beef is the tenderloin, the outer loin, and the eye meat. These are the three places where marbling patterns are most likely to appear. And they are also the most delicious places. Only the meat in these places will be rated as superior, and specially selected beef. The next is the upper brain and the buttocks. The good quality meat can be selected as the best grade. And then the breast and brisket. The meat here will basically be rated as standard grade, and the shoulder and tendon will be commercial grade. The neck will be usable, and the remaining minced meat and internal organs will be minced and canned grade. Hearing Robin's words, Jiang Hai also remembered the location of the meat on the beef. It turned out that the beef that he thought he bought was the best was not the best at all. Thinking about it, he was really emotional. Then I want the eye meat. Then leave some tenderloin and outer rib for me. And some minced meat to feed Xiaobai and Little Yellow. The rest is up to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robins also chuckled. This is what he should do. When he used to work in those ranches, generally speaking, the eye meat, tenderloin, and outer rib were the farm owner's own. They ate it themselves or sold it. It had nothing to do with these cowboys. If they were lucky, they could get some upper brain and hip meat. If they were unlucky, they could not get these things. They could only get beef shoulder, tendon, brisket, and breast, and even some minced meat. He had to admit that most of the time, Jiang Hai was quite generous. After learning a bit from Luo Binsi, he didn't need to do the rest for the time being. Luo Binsi and the others would naturally do the killing. According to them, it was too late today, so they could kill it tomorrow. Jiang Hai left the cowshed and returned to his home. After taking a bath and feeding the two dogs, it was almost noon. At noon, Jiang Hai received a call from Philip and asked him to go to his home for a meal. When he arrived, Philip and his wife, as well as Ai Dehua, were already waiting for him. Jiang Hai wasn't polite and directly ate a meal. Then the three of them rode the all-terrain vehicle and came to the dock. At this time, the open boat, which seemed to be empty, had a lot of things on it. Nets, anchors, large bundles of ropes, canvas, diesel, raincoats, and even a gun next to it. What are we going to do? Although Jiang Hai didn't suffer from paranoia, seeing so many things all of a sudden still made his liver tremble. He looked at Edward with a strange expression and said, "Yes. It's obvious that the boss is going to sea for the first time. The sea is not the same as the shore. We not only have to guard against the fish in the sea, but also against people. Sometimes people are the most dangerous." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philemon on the other side said with a smile, "Don't listen to him, we are just in case. After all, this is the coastal waters of the United States. If something happens, the Coast Guard helicopter will come in less than 5 minutes. Don't forget, boss, you are in the privileged class. You are a rich man." Hearing Philemon's words, Jiang Hai was really stunned. "Are there pirates here too?" But looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Ai Dehua said, "Today's second update is for everyone." Chapter 65. Vomit. Vomit. Lying on the side of the boat, Jiang Hai felt his stomach churning, his intestines churning, and his brain churning. This is not the first time Jiang Hai has taken a boat. But he used to take a boat in China. Basically, he took a river boat. Although there are some waves, they are really not big. When the waves are big, no one will drive a boat out. So Jiang Hai has always thought that taking a boat on the sea is not much different from taking a boat in the river. It is estimated that it will be a little shaky, but it should be fine. But less than 5 minutes after the boat left the port, he regretted it. How can the small waves in the river compare to the wind and waves on the sea? Jiang Hai's fishing ground is located offshore Boston, and under the sea, he can see the extended continental shelf. In such a situation, Jiang Hai felt that the shaking was not ordinary, let alone going to the open sea. Of course, It is impossible to take such a small boat to the open sea. 5 minutes after leaving the dock, Jiang Hai had some urge to vomit, but fortunately, his physical fitness is very strong, and he withstood it. About half an hour after the boat ran, Jiang Hai couldn't help it. After signaling them to stop, he immediately vomited on the side of the boat. "Boss, are you okay?" Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Philip couldn't help but worry. "I don't know, but I should be fine." Waving his hand, Jiang Hai said weakly, "There should be no big problem, just seasickness. But boss, your physical fitness is so good. How can you be seasick?" At this time, Ai Dehua, who was in charge of driving the boat, also came over with a smile. After checking Jiang Hai's situation, he couldn't help but smile. "There is vomit here, and it suddenly attracted a lot of people. Philip, you drive first, I will find some medicine for the boss. Just drive slowly." Patting Jiang Hai on the back, Ai Dehua said, "On the boat, it is easy for such things to happen." With the Americans' attitude of cherishing their lives to the point of making one's hair stand on end, they would definitely have brought along a medical kit on the ship. Okay. While Ai Dehua went to find the medicine box, Philip also took over the steering wheel and began to work. "Wow, Philip, I didn't expect you to be a jack of all trades. You know how to graze and drive a boat. Otherwise, you can follow Uncle Ai Dehua in the future. I will pay you a cruise salary." Lying on the side of the boat, Jiang Hai looked at Philip, who was driving the boat slowly in order to take care of Jiang Hai, and he couldn't help but joke. "Forget it, I'm very happy that you gave me a raise. If I can be at sea all day, I won't be used to it. You know, I'm a person who can't keep my mouth shut, and going to the beach is the loneliest. I don't want to be shut up by Ai Dehua or other bad-tempered sailors forever." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip immediately shook his head and said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also chuckled. He doesn't understand the suffering of sailors. In fact, although sailors earn a lot, it is indeed a very painful thing. Jiang Hai is still okay. If it is some ocean-going fishing boat, it will take 3 to 5 months for them to come back. And during these 3 to 5 months, their living space is on the sea. Most of the time, there is no signal at sea, only satellite phones, and they can't play at any time. So life can be said to be extremely boring. Some crew members directly said that life on the ocean is not even as comfortable as staying in prison. After all, there is no need to work in prison. But the people on the ocean-going fishing boat are very bored in addition to work. There are no women, no TV, no phone, no way to play games, because electricity needs to burn diesel. Who knows what will happen if they encounter something on the sea? So the diesel on the boat can't be used for anything other than sailing. The food they eat is also very simple. They eat fish and vegetables every day, and sometimes some fruits. These are all brought when they go to sea. Eating these every day, their mouth is inevitably bland. So on the ocean-going fishing boat, it can be said that the only entertainment is gambling, but this game shouldn't be played often. After all, they do this job to make money, not to lose money. Therefore, it is understandable that the salary of sailors is high. After all, that kind of life is really difficult. Some busybodies had done some research and found that there were 3 places where homosexuality was most likely to happen: prison, navy, and fishing boats. Compared to the first 2, the probability of true love appearing in the 3rd place was much higher, due to the suppression of the level difference. Of course, whether Ai Dehua is gay or not, Jiang Hai doesn't know. His sexual orientation is normal, and that is enough. Obviously, Philip doesn't want to live like this because of a few $100s a week. It is more annoying than killing him. "Hey Philip, I want you to shut up now. Come on, boss." At this time, Ai Dehua came out with a medicine box, opened it, took out some medicine, and gave it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also recognized these medicine. It is some special medicine for motion sickness. After taking it, Jiang Hai took a few deep breaths. He doesn't know if it is a psychological effect, but he really doesn't feel as dizzy as before. Looking at Jiang Hai lying back on the boat, Ai Dehua patted Philip and took over the driver's seat. As for Jiang Hai, after taking the medicine, he felt really comfortable under the winter sun. He fell asleep in a daze. When he woke up, he glanced at his phone. It is already 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun is already slanting in the sky. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai slowly sat up from the chair. After sleeping for a while, Jiang Hai felt that he has preliminarily adapted to this kind of shaking. At least now, although the boat is still shaking, he doesn't feel nauseous anymore. Boss, you are awake. Seeing Jiang Hai sit up, Philip, who was pulling the net along the boat, saw him and couldn't help but smile. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai also looked at him. At this time, the two people on the ship had a clear division of labor. Ai Dehua was steering the ship, while Philip was at the side of the ship. He was constantly pulling up small nets from the side of the ship. Inside these nets, there were some small fishes, some small shrimps, and even small crabs. There were also some creatures that Jiang Hai didn't know about. This made Jiang Hai very curious. What are you doing? Standing up from the shaking boat, Jiang Hai walked to Philip's side and asked curiously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, before Philip could speak, Ai Dehua answered first. This is one of the ways to test the potential of the sea area. I have to admit that you've picked up a ready-made one, boss. Over the years, in order to sell this manor at a good price, the auction company has been artificially protecting the ecological environment and food chain here. Therefore, the ecology of the sea area is really colorful. If it weren't for the fact that it's winter now, I would definitely go into the sea to take a look. That's right. After listening to Ai Dehua's explanation, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. If it wasn't for the good environmental protection, he wouldn't have bought it. Don't forget, his body is extremely sensitive to these things. The ecological environment of the sea can be said to be perfect. All the creatures form a biological chain. From the sonar, I can see that there are a total of 4 coral reefs here. The big one is about 10 square kilometers, and the small one is about 3 square kilometers. There is a large number of fish living in it, and there is also a seagrass forest. Although the rest is sand, the quality is good. At least the creatures are very rich. Ai Dehua looked at the fish tank beside him. It was almost full, and he couldn't help but sigh. Jiang Hai also walked over and looked at the tank. This time, he was really shocked because there were a lot of things inside. Most of them were fish. In addition to fish, there were also shrimps, crabs, and a lot of strange things. For example, sea cucumbers, starfish, sea urchins, and a lot of shellfish. He really didn't know how these people caught them. This is something that old fishermen can do. It's not a big deal. Seeing Jiang Hai's curious look, Ai Dehua chuckled and continued to drive the boat. Although he said that it's not a big deal, he was very proud of it. Boss, do you know all these marine products? At this time, Philip also collected the last few cages and poured the things inside while talking to Jiang Hai. But listening to his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head. To be honest, he doesn't know much. I know that this is a starfish, this is a sea urchin, this is a sea cucumber, this is a fish. I have seen this before. This should be a cod. After all, I have been eating it for a long time. This is a clownfish. More or less, this is a spoon. Pointing to the marine products in the tank, Jiang Hai said slowly. But unfortunately, there are dozens of creatures in the tank, but Jiang Hai only knows a few of them. Well, this is right, it's a sea urchin. To be honest, we don't like the taste of this thing very much. But I heard that the people in the East like to eat it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip also put on gloves and started to dig. Europeans almost don't eat sea urchins. The way to eat sea urchins is to eat sea urchin yellow. But in their view, sea urchins are internal organs. So there aren't many people in Europe and America who eat sea urchins. Of course, this is not absolute. There are some people who like to eat it. But Philip and Ai Dehua obviously don't belong to this category. As for sea cucumbers, to be honest, Jiang Hai has a lot of them. Although it's not the most famous plum ginseng, it's only found in the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. There's no plum ginseng in the Atlantic Ocean. But the Atlantic Ocean has its own unique sea cucumber, called the Atlantic ginseng, also known as the Arctic ginseng. Unfortunately, Europeans and Americans don't eat this thing. They just take its internal organs to make medicine. After the internal organs are taken, they will throw the sea cucumber back into the sea. Sea cucumbers can continue to live without internal organs. and it won't take long for them to grow new internal organs. So it can be regarded as a recyclable resource. Today's update has been delivered early. Please keep it and recommend it. Chapter 66. Of course, in recent years, huaxia had become the focus of the food industry. Europeans and Americans had also started to catch sea cucumbers and freeze them before sending them to huaxia. Sea cucumbers were very popular in huaxia, but it was obvious that the sea cucumbers Jiang Hai caught were not for sale. Ai Dehua only wanted to check the marine resources, so he did not freeze the sea cucumbers. Instead, he soaked the sea cucumbers in the seawater to prevent them from dissolving. The autolysis of sea cucumbers was mainly due to the fact that their bodies would produce an autolytic enzyme after they left the seawater. Within 6 to 7 hours, the sea cucumbers would melt themselves into a liquid state and turn into water. This was also a legend. Europeans and Americans did not eat sea urchins and sea cucumbers, but Jiang Hai ate them. These things were destined to be his dinner. Other than sea urchins and sea cucumbers, there were also many delicious things left in the tank. Crabs were Jiang Hai's favorite food back in China. However, the price of crabs in China had always been quite expensive. After coming to the United States, he hadn't had the chance to eat it yet. He didn't expect that he would be able to eat it today. There were more than a dozen crabs in the tank. The biggest one was about half a kilogram. Jiang Hai also knew this type of crab. It was the most common type of crab. In China, the crab that was bought was basically the swimming crab. It was because other crabs were either inedible or hard to catch. Crabs are divided into 5 types: walking crabs, swimming crabs, burrowing crabs, hidden crabs, and symbiotic crabs. Big crabs like the famous killer crab are walking crabs. But this type of crab is too big and strong. Also, they only walk under the sea, so it is not easy to catch them. Swimming crabs refer to this type of swimming crab. This is also the only type of swimming crab. It is the only one in the crab family that can swim. There are also many burrowing crabs, but we can also see them on the shore. This type of crab is basically terrestrial or semi-terrestrial. It is very difficult to see them in the deep sea. Look, this is a frog crab. This is a Joanna crab. They are all burrowing crabs. This is a hidden crab. They pretend to be a reef or something. This is a petal crab. It is a hidden crab, but it does not taste good. Symbiotic crabs are not easy to catch. Except for some hermit crabs, there must be some in these shells. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to be interested in crabs, Philemon explained with a smile. Although Philemon was a professional cowboy, he also had some understanding of marine creatures. After all, he was a sailor. Seeing that the boss was interested in these things, he started to introduce them to Jiang Hai. After introducing the crabs, he started to introduce the prawns. After all, prawns and crabs were related. There were many types of prawns here. At a glance, there were 6 types. The most common one was a red prawn. This prawn was about 10 centimeters long. Jiang Hai was very familiar with this type of prawn. It was the Arctic ice prawn, also known as the Arctic sweet prawn. It tasted very good. In addition to this type of prawn, there was also a green prawn, which was bigger than the Arctic sweet prawn. This type of prawn was a type of prawn that Jiang Hai had eaten before. Other than this, Jiang Hai also knew about the prawn crawler, also known as the mantis prawn. This type of prawn was not a prawn, and there were many of them in Bing City. You could eat them all year round, and they tasted good. That was why Jiang Hai liked them very much. Other than these 3 types of prawns, there was another type of prawn that Jiang Hai knew. The lobster. It was the legendary Maine lobster. Actually, it was better to call it the Boston lobster. But this lobster was still a small shrimp. From head to tail, it was only about 10 centimeters long. It was not much bigger than a crayfish, and probably did not have much meat. Speaking of lobsters, Jiang Hai remembered that he had seen a lot of them the last time he went to the sea. Seems like he will have to go to the sea when he has time. He had bought a farm in Boston, but he had not eaten the specialty of Boston lobster. Jiang Hai felt embarrassed when he told others about it. Other than these prawns that he knew, there were still 3 types that he did not know. Jiang Hai could not help but look at Philemon. There are so many prawns here. Even if we raise some fish now, It won't cause ecological imbalance. Let me introduce these 3 kinds of prawns to you, boss. This kind of long prawn is called spotted prawn, also known as Japanese prawn. It's a kind of prawn, and is distributed all over the world. It's also the largest prawn. This one is about 24 or 25 centimeters long, which is already mature. The largest one is more than 30 centimeters long, but its meat is average and not as delicious as Arctic sweet prawn. Sure enough, Philemon did not disappoint Jiang Hai. Under Jiang Hai's gaze, Philemon picked up a large prawn that looked like it had tiger stripes. It was segmented and looked like it had tiger stripes. Philemon explained to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai had seen this type of prawn in the seafood market before, but it was too expensive. In Bing City's seafood market, a caddy of live green prawns was only about 20 renminbi. But a caddy of dead prawns could be sold for more than 40 renminbi. But this type of prawn could be sold for more than 50 renminbi per caddy. But this type of prawn could also be found in this fishery. After putting down the prawn, Philemon picked up another thing. But this thing looked more like a worm than a prawn. This is called cicada prawn. It is a type of prawn, but it is very small and doesn't taste good. There is not much meat. Playing with the prawn in front of him, Philemon said with a smile, "This is eagle prawn." It is said that this type of prawn existed in the Jurassic period. So there is a genus called Jurassic prawn, but that is Australian prawn. We only have this type of prawn. It is also very small and doesn't have much meat. After putting down the prawn that looked more like a worm, Philemon picked up the last type of prawn that Jiang Hai didn't know and said to Jiang Hai, "And this type of prawn, in fact, most of these prawns are used as food. Only this type of prawn is the most important." After putting down the prawn, Philemon looked at the mantis prawn. "I know. This is mantis prawn. We also have it in our country. It tastes good." Hearing Philemon's words, Jiang Hai immediately said, Huaxia people eat it." Well, Huaxia people seem to eat everything. This is a kind of cleaning prawn. We basically don't eat it here. This kind of prawn swims very fast and will eat dead fish, prawns, and crabs. It is the hero of keeping the bottom of the sea clean. Playing with the mantis prawn in his hand, Philemon also said with a smile. Obviously, maybe because of his golden finger, Jiang Hai is obviously more concerned about the sea than the ranch. He also knows more about aquatic animals. He also knows about the cleaning prawn. Other prawns are eaten by fish, but this kind of prawn is protected by fish. This kind of prawn is the doctor of the sea. It specializes in curing sick fish, and is very famous in the sea. But whether it is Peter rock prawn, hedgehog prawn, yellow hedgehog prawn, Kalia whip prawn, etc., these prawns are all temperate and tropical prawns. In the cold zone, at least Jiang Hai doesn't have them. Jiang Hai doesn't quite understand this. In fact, this is very easy to explain, because it is located here and the water temperature is very cold. Therefore, aquatic creatures are not as prone to diseases as temperate and tropical creatures. And even if they are sick, survival of the fittest will not matter. After all, there are only a few of them, and the mantis prawns will dispose of their bodies to complete the ecological cycle. The thing that Jiang Hai thought was a sea intestine wasn't actually a sea intestine, but a sea eel. The sea eel itself wasn't delicious, but its close relative, the seven-gill eel, was a very good food ingredient, although both looked equally disgusting. There is also a kind of creature called sea rabbit, also known as sea slug. To be honest, this thing also looks disgusting. After introducing the prawns and crabs, Philemon began to introduce the most important thing, fish. But after all, this place isn't a farm yet. Therefore, many of the fish caught here can't be eaten. This is because most of them are fish caught in the coral zone. The so-called sparrow bream fish, you might not understand, but to put it another way, clownfish. Clownfish is also a type of sparrow bream. Basically, any coral fish or sea anemone fish is a type of sparrow bream. This kind of fish can be found not only in temperate and tropical zones, but also in cold zones. It's just that they don't come out in winter. In addition to this kind of fish that can't be eaten, there are a lot of edible fish here. The main ones are cod, herring, and some sardines, which Jiang Hai knows. There is also a kind of ugly fish, which Philemon told Jiang Hai is grouper. But because this kind of fish mainly lives in temperate and tropical zones, there aren't many of them in the fish farm here. Therefore, the one that was caught wasn't big, it was only slightly bigger than a palm. Jiang Hai grabbed it, and found that it was about a caddy, less than 2 caddies. For a grouper, this kind of body is still at the kindergarten level. In addition to these fish, there are many other kinds of fish, such as bonito, stingray, barracuda, American red snapper, and so on. There are dozens of species here. When Philemon started talking, Jiang Hai was still paying attention, but he soon became distracted. Just as he was distracted, he suddenly saw a large spider jump out of the water trough and begin to crawl quickly. Seeing this, Jiang Hai subconsciously reached out to grab the spider, but Philemon grabbed his hand faster. Seeing Philemon's action, Jiang Hai was stunned. He knew that Philemon wouldn't grab him for no reason, so after looking at Philemon, he withdrew his hand. After confirming that Jiang Hai left the spider-like creature, Philemon sighed in relief. "Boss, it looks like your underwater world is really good. You even have sea spiders." Picking up a wooden plank, Philemon first took the spider-like thing out of the trough. Then he stepped on it and threw it back into the sea. Hearing Philemon's words, Jiang Hai's brows wrinkled. Sea spider? Spiders can also live in the sea? In fact, although sea spiders are called spiders, they are actually crabs. But don't think that crabs are easy to bully. This kind of creature is called the underwater poison king. It's not just for show. Second update, continuous delivery. Chapter 67. Just a little bit of this thing's venom is enough to kill all of us on board. After rinsing the wooden board with seawater and putting it back in the cabin, Philemon said with a smile, "In fact, under the sea, just like on land, there are poisonous creatures everywhere. Not only are there poisonous sea snakes, jellyfish, sea anemones, and many other poisonous fishes. Some are poisonous because of their meat, some are poisonous because of their eggs, some are poisonous because of the thorns on their fins, some are poisonous because of their internal organs, and some are poisonous because of their blood. In Huaxia alone, there are more than 100 kinds of poisonous fish. In comparison, the Atlantic Ocean is slightly more peaceful than the Pacific Ocean. There are many creatures that you don't know are poisonous, but in fact they are poisonous. For example, catfish. There are 3,000 kinds of catfish in the world, but more than half of them are poisonous. Who knows? There are also many poisonous fishes, not to mention the river otter and the spiny centipede. Other fishes such as the zhangxing, draco, dufu, and so on are poisonous. So if you don't know about marine life, it is really dangerous to go into the sea. In fact, there weren't too many shark attacks every year. Except for the crazy tiger shark, very few sharks would add humans into their diet. Therefore, the number of people who died from shark attacks every year was much less than the number of people who were killed by these poisonous marine creatures. So since they decided to go into the sea, Jiang Hai listened very carefully. After all, this is about his life. Everyone knows that Jiang Hai has no special characteristics, but he cherishes his life. While introducing and sailing the boat, unknowingly, the land in the distance has been faintly visible. At this time, Ai Dehua also stopped the boat. Jiang Hai saw his action and couldn't help but be stunned. What's the use of stopping the boat in this place? Come, let's sort it out. Ignoring Jiang Hai's doubts, Ai Dehua looked at Philemon and said. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Philemon immediately put on his clothes, put on his gloves and started sorting. Although the main purpose of this trip was to check the nearby marine resources, some of the marine products in this tank were edible, and some of them were inedible. They couldn't take all of them back. The inedible ones were thrown back into the sea, and the edible ones were left behind. Of course, the dead ones were also thrown away. They wouldn't eat the stale ones. Listening to the words of these two, Jiang Hai muttered in his heart that they were a prodigal son, but he also followed them to sort out the items. However, his main targets were the sea cucumbers and sea urchins. Right, there were also the crabs. These people wouldn't eat the first two, so he couldn't ask them to throw them away. For Jiang Hai, these things were just for fun. As for crabs, although Europeans and Americans ate them, it was really wasteful for them to eat crabs. Basically, they only ate walking crabs because the meat in their legs was thick. As for the insides of the crabs, they were not willing to eat them. At this moment, Jiang Hai didn't say much. He went to the tank and picked out the crabs, sea cucumbers, and sea urchins. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Ai Dehua and Philemon also laughed. They don't know what's so good about these things. Compared to Jiang Hai picking these things, they are more interested in fish. But they are not picking the fish to eat. They are picking the fish to throw away. They don't eat all the bream fish. They can't eat it. They can't say which fish is poisonous. So all the clownfish, glossy gill fish, damselfish fish, blue bream, bright blue bream, and so on, these valuable fish in the domestic ornamental fish market, are thrown away by them. Then some fish smaller than 15 centimeters are also thrown away, including the grouper. For them, such small fish is not necessary to eat. But for Jiang Hai, it is really a waste. After all, such a big fish is already a commodity fish that can be sold in China. But in Europe and America, it is still a fish fry. He doesn't know when he can eat the grouper. Fortunately, a lot of fish were prepared to be thrown away, but there were still a lot of fish left in the tank. These fish were basically more than 20 centimeters long. There were common cod, herring, and bonito, which was actually a type of tuna, but it was the least valuable one. There was also red snapper, which was more common in the coastal waters. It was more common in the Pacific Ocean, and slightly less in the Atlantic Ocean. It was considered a type of sea bass, and it tasted pretty good. There was also mullet, which was called mullet in China. Generally speaking, there are three best things in caviar: salmon roe, sturgeon roe, and mullet roe. The mullet refers to this kind of mullet. This kind of fish can be found everywhere in the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, but it belongs to the temperate zone. If it wasn't for the oceanic climate in Boston, it is estimated that these fish would have migrated south long ago. When picking these fish, they naturally threw away the fish that they don't want. Their actions also attracted the attention of several birds in the sky. With the sound of birds chirping, these birds also flew straight from the sky. They went to pick up the small fish that Ai Dehua and Philip threw away. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai was shocked. Aren't these birds afraid of people? Looking at the birds that kept wandering above the boat, Jiang Hai said strangely, "Naturally they are not afraid. No one will catch them here." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip also said with a smile, "These seabirds are the friends of our sailors. Not only can they help us relieve boredom, but the most important thing is that where there are seabirds, there is land. If there is land, there is fresh water and food. In this way, we can be protected at sea, so our relationship with seabirds is still very good." Seeing Jiang Hai's puzzled expression, Ai Dehua also said with a smile. Then he threw the fish at a higher height, and threw it towards the seabirds. Moreover, Americans have a lot of feelings for seabirds. I think Boss also knows that our national bird is the bald sea eagle. Here we have a special feeling for sea eagles. It is said that in the middle of the last century, European and American ladies liked to put sea eagle feathers on their hats. Because of this, sea eagles were on the verge of extinction. Later, the women in Boston established an association to protect sea eagles. Later on, when San Diego, Utah was developed, there was a locust plague there. Fortunately, sea eagles flew there and ate all the locusts, allowing the first batch of immigrants to survive. So here, these little guys are our friends. After Ai Dehua finished speaking, Philip hurriedly said, "It seems that this guy really can't stop talking. What kind of seabirds are these sea eagles?" After listening to their introduction, Jiang Hai was also very interested. He picked up a small fish and threw it into the air. Soon, this small fish was picked up by a seabird in the air and flew away quickly. "No, this is a puffin. Hayo is a bit bigger than them. There are puffins in the woods of our manor, but I haven't seen them in a while." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip introduced them. "No, there are still a few. Look at those, they are obviously bigger. They are sea eagles. Their scientific name is Arctic seagull." After Philip finished speaking, Ai Dehua chuckled and pointed to a few bigger seabirds in the group, and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked over. Sure enough, there were a few bigger seabirds over there. Compared to the puffins, these seabirds were much more overbearing. When there is a fish, they will immediately grab it. If they can't grab it, they will start to snatch the fish from the mouths of other puffins. They look just like robbers. But in nature, the weak are prey to the strong, not to mention snatching a piece of meat. Even if they want to eat you, they still have to endure. This is the law of nature. Jiang Hai wasn't a good person. He didn't want to drive away these sea eagles, so he just increased the strength of his throw. For a while, feeding these seabirds was very interesting. When Ai Dehua saw Jiang Hai's actions, he also deliberately slowed down his movements. Since Jiang Hai is willing to play, then he will leave more for the boss. Caw. But just when Jiang Hai was having fun, suddenly in the distant sky, a crisp chirping sound was heard. With this chirping sound, the seabirds that were still surrounding the ship instantly flew away, scattering like birds and beasts. After the birds flew away, Jiang Hai saw two small black dots high up in the sky, one in front and one behind, chasing each other. With his eyesight, he could only see two birds, but he didn't know what kind of birds they were. It seems to be an albatross and a sea eagle. At this time, Philip, who was next to him, took out his binoculars and glanced at it with some doubts. But he didn't feel confident when he said this, because albatrosses are birds from the south. He often saw them when he was sailing in California, but in the North District, especially in Boston, they are not common here. Even if they can be seen, it's only in summer. Now it's winter. These birds probably went to the south for the winter. After all, he is not a fisherman, so he can only be sure that the bird behind should be a sea eagle. But he is not sure about the one in front. It's an albatross. Except for this kind of bird, no other bird has a wingspan that is so much larger than a sea eagle. It seems that this bird should have something to do, so it didn't go to the south for the winter. Compared to Philip, Ai Dehua, who has been dealing with the sea for most of his life, said with certainty after a glance. While the three of them were watching, the two birds were like two sharp arrows, piercing the sky and disappearing into the distance. Since the birds have disappeared, the three of them turned their eyes back again. Since there are no more seabirds to feed here, they are too lazy to throw them away one by one. After all, it's already late, and the sun is almost a third of the way down. They don't have time to dawdle anymore. Jiang Hai and Philip directly lifted the tank with the unwanted fish and poured it directly into the sea. At this time, a dorsal fin was erected. It's Thursday. I don't know if there will be any recommendations next week. This week's recommendations are really bad. Of course, this has something to do with Xiao Fei. Forget it. I hope the editor can give me a better recommendation. Today's updates are continuously delivered. Chapter 68. Sharks. Jiang Hai's current 5 senses can be said to be the limit of human beings. The moment the shark fin broke the water, Jiang Hai had already noticed it and shouted immediately. Hearing his words, Philip next to him was also shocked. But when he looked at the shark's fin in the distance, he couldn't help but sigh and continue to pour the fish. And the sharks on this side, after smelling the fish, also rushed over and began to eat in big mouthfuls. It's dangerous. Seeing Philip continue to pour the shark's fin, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned and whispered, "Boss, don't be afraid, that's a reef shark." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dehua on the other side said with a smile, "Reef shark." Hearing what Ai Dehua said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned, then looked at him. Boss, in fact, people who often sail the sea know that sharks are indeed very fierce. But in fact, there are only a few kinds of sharks that we mainly guard against. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip, who had finished pouring the fish at this time, also said with a smile, "There are a total of 368 kinds of sharks in the world. Of course, this is not absolute, but these are the ones that are now recorded. Among these sharks, there are only 7 kinds that will take the initiative to attack people. The most famous are the 3 major sharks. The great white shark, also known as the man-eating shark, is the largest carnivorous fish in the world with powerful attack power. The second is the tiger shark family, followed by the hammerhead shark, known as the double hammerhead shark. These 3 sharks are known as the 3 sharks that like to attack humans the most. In addition, there are also sharks that threaten humans in the sea, such as bull shark, white-tip shark, black-tip shark, black-winged true shark, and sharp-snout mackerel. Basically, there are only 7 kinds of sharks that threaten humans in the sea. Apart from the crazy tiger shark, most of the other sharks that attacked humans were mistakenly killed, more than 90% of them. Because when humans surfboard on the beach, looking up from the bottom of the sea, they look like the food of sharks. Therefore, at this time, sharks often came out to attack humans, but most of the time, like the great white shark, if it felt something wrong with its bite, it would swim away. Therefore, many people were attacked by great white sharks, but there were also many people who survived. Double hammerhead sharks had a bad temper. Although they were not like tiger sharks, who would kill you the moment they saw you, it mainly depended on their mood. If they were in a good mood, they would swim away directly. If they were in a bad mood, they would come and kill you. There was nothing to say about this. The remaining sharks were not very large. The bull shark could grow up to 3.5 meters. The sharp-snout mackerel could grow up to 4 meters. The white-tip shark could grow up to 2 meters. And the black-winged true shark was only a meter long. Therefore, this kind of shark could be considered a pet shark. In addition to these 7 types of sharks, the remaining shark that injured the most people were nurse sharks. However, everyone knew that nurse sharks didn't eat people, and they didn't have any attack power. However, it was clear after looking at the file. These nurse sharks only hurt humans when humans dived into the water to harass them. It was like teasing a dog. Even a dog would bite you if it was provoked, let alone a shark. This was their own death, and they couldn't blame others. The reef shark that Ai Dehua mentioned was actually not referring to a kind of shark, but a general term. In the world, there was only one real reef shark, the Caribbean reef shark. The reef shark in his mouth referred to some sharks that relied on coral reefs to survive, such as lemon shark, grinder shark, also known as nurse shark, wrinkled shark, tiger shark, cat shark, dog shark, sand tiger shark, and so on. The shark that floated up now was also a kind of reef shark. The lemon shark's attack power was okay, but it basically wouldn't attack humans, especially when people were still on the boat. Although Jiang Hai's open boat was not big, it was definitely not small. However, it was definitely not small. It was far from being comparable to a shark that was only about 2 meters long. Boss, if you meet a shark while playing underwater, the best way is to take a long detour. However, if this shark attacks you, don't panic. If you have a weapon, just kill it. If not, punch its nose and eyes with your fist. Actually, sharks are very timid, just like their family Muricidae. Their courage is not much greater than that of rats. Philemon explained with a smile as he cleaned the fish trough in the seawater. After eating the remaining small fish, the lemon shark slowly swam away. Seeing his movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but remember that the last time he went into the sea, he saw this thing. It turned out that it was not a threat to him. It seems that his idea of catching lobsters can be carried out in advance. On second thought, he seemed to have caught a shark about the same size as this one. By the way, what about the shark I caught? Is it dead? Looking at the lemon shark that had swam away, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask Ai Dehua. In fact, if he didn't see this shark today, he would have almost forgotten about it. That shark is still alive. It's living very well. Sometimes Robbins and I will bring some meat that we don't eat and feed it. It is still living very well in the pool. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dehua on the other side also said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. Now rich people are used to raising sharks. Should he also raise a few of them? To be honest, raising sharks is really impressive, and the most important thing is that it is quite easy for him to raise sharks now. Seawater doesn't need money to buy, and sharks don't need money to buy. In his sea area, there are dozens if not hundreds. He just needs to catch them. The only thing he needs to pay for is the money for the fish tank. And the most important thing is that if he uses his blood to tame these sharks, he can play in the sea. How cool would it be? Others drive motorboats while he rides sharks. How awesome would that be? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai was even more interested in the sand tiger shark on his shore. As the open boat slowly drove back to the dock, Ai Dehua and Philemon also carried a huge tank out. This is what they sorted out and can eat. As for Jiang Hai, he also has a tank. This is what he picked up for himself. It is filled with sea cucumbers, sea urchins, all kinds of shrimps and big crabs. They are all good things, but Europeans and Americans don't eat sea cucumbers and sea urchins. So it doesn't matter if Jiang Hai eats them alone. As for shrimps and crabs, although these people eat them, they obviously won't fight with the boss for them. In their opinion, eating fish is much better than eating these troublesome things. After setting up the tank, they drove their own all-terrain vehicles back to the residential area. After Jiang Hai went back, he went to a bathroom in his villa and separated the things in it. Then he took a large piece of beef and went to the forest to look at the sand tiger shark. Although Jiang Hai has only seen this sand tiger shark once, it has eaten a squid stained with Jiang Hai's blood. So when Jiang Hai went to look at it, it clearly recognized Jiang Hai and suddenly sped up underwater. It seems that sharks can also be tamed. Seeing the sand tiger shark's obviously excited expression, Jiang Hai chuckled and put another drop of blood on the beef in his hand. Then he threw the beef into the pool. Bang! As soon as the beef entered the water, the sand tiger shark's sense of smell, which is much more sensitive than a dog's, smelled the beef and blood immediately. It rushed out, bit the beef in its mouth, and even jumped out of the pool. The seawater in the pool was all over Jiang Hai's head, but Jiang Hai didn't care. Instead he laughed. Looking at the shark that fell back into the pool and wandered back and forth, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "Stay here. I will come to see you when I have time. When the time is right, I will put you back into the sea." Then he used the bag he wore to fill a large bag with seawater and returned to his room. He didn't forget that sea cucumbers and sea urchins are all marine creatures and need to be raised with seawater. After settling everything, Jiang Hai also received a call from Philemon, telling him that dinner was ready. Jiang Hai heard what Philemon said and didn't say much. He went directly to his house. Today is another party, a party focused on fish dishes. Tomorrow is another party to kill cows. To be honest, Jiang Hai likes this kind of life very much. He doesn't have to worry about food or drink. He plays all day long and has nothing to worry about. He gathers every few days. Seeing that his manner is gradually going on the right track, the smile on Jiang Hai's face became more and more intense. Although he spent a lot of money, it is also a rare thing for Jiang Hai to be so happy. But at this time, Jiang Hai is happy, but there are also many people who are upset. For example, at this time in Boston, Sheeta Law Firm. "Mr. Adams, can you give me 5 minutes, please?" Moses Adams, the top lawyer of Sheeta Law Firm, is 42 years old this year. He entered the industry 20 years ago and has fought 912 cases in his life, winning 713 cases. The cases he lost were because of irrefutable evidence, but he also minimized the losses of the parties. Otherwise, he wouldn't have easily become the third in the Sheeta Law Firm in Boston. For ordinary lawyers, the average income is about $100,000 a year, but for Moses Adams, his annual income is at least $1 million. However, he recently received a big job from a big manor owner. If this job is done well, not only will he have a lot of income, but also the greatest reputation in the industry. After all this time, he is suing the entire state police system. Although the evidence is somewhat insufficient, he is doing very well now. In just a few days, there is even a rumor that the Massachusetts state government is preparing to fire all the police in the Winthrop Police Department and then transfer people to take charge. This is a big progress, and at this time, many people can't sit still. Today's second update is continuously delivered. Chapter 69. Mr. Smith, I think I've made myself clear. It's not that I don't want to help, but that I don't have the means or position to help you. I'm a lawyer. To be precise, I'm just a weapon in my client's hand. How to deal with you doesn't depend on me, but on my client. I just need to be a good legal weapon. Looking at the old man in front of him, Moses Adams chuckled. Hearing his words, the old man couldn't help but be speechless. I understand. It's our responsibility that Mr. Jiang Hai encountered such a thing. But to replace everyone in the police station is a bit too much. They are all good police officers. The middle-aged man clenched his fist and said loudly, "Would good police officers blackmail the plaintiff?" Moses Adams pushed up the glasses on his face and said with disdain, "No, that's just an accident. There are only a few bad guys." According to Huasia's words, this is called a black sheep. But most police officers are still good people. They are doing their job to maintain the security of the town. Hearing Moses Adams' rebuttal, the old man couldn't help but speak loudly. "Then you should talk to the black sheep. It's useless to talk to me, since it has already happened. All I need to do is to fight this lawsuit well." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Moses Adams said indifferently, "I beg you, I really beg you. Me, the deputy director, and Byron will be in charge of this. They can't not have this job. Vickis has been a police officer for more than 40 years. He will retire in a year. Prius's son has just been born. He's not even 1 year old yet. He needs this job. Pals and Vera are getting married next month. I don't want to receive a resignation letter at their wedding. And Luen Baffa Chris Werther. Please be magnanimous and let them go." Looking at Moses Adams in front of him, the old man was clearly very agitated and said loudly, "I don't have the final say in this matter. You have to look for my boss." Looking at the old man who was about to kneel in front of him, Moses Adams couldn't help but be stunned. In fact, in essence, most lawyers' consciences had been eaten by dogs. The only thing they needed to do was not to uphold justice, but to defend their clients. However, Moses Adams still had a conscience. When he took on the task, he would more or less consider the severity of the matter. To be honest, Jiang Hai's case was very bad. Of course, he was referring to the other party, kidnapping and murder. When he convicted those hooligans, he was not soft-hearted at all. They deserved it. However, when dealing with these policemen, he was a little hesitant. This was because these policemen, other than a few people, most of them might really not know. If they were to eat all of them, it would indeed be a little troublesome. But as Jiang Hai's lawyer, the only thing he needed to do was to convince himself that these people must have known and participated in this. Although this matter was regarded as irrefutable evidence, and he was ready to do a big job, it did not mean that he could ignore the work of so many people. If these policemen were really replaced, then what greeted them was not just a change of job, but unemployment. At the same time, with such a stain on their resume, civil service units would not hire them in the future. Therefore, Moses Adams had some doubts at this time, because he did not know whether what he did was right or wrong. "I know, but I can't see Mr. Jiang Hai. I also know that I will make it difficult for you. But if it's possible, can I trouble you to take me to see Mr. Jiang Hai? Let me see him, and let me persuade him personally." Looking at Moses Adams in front of him, the old man here looked at him with a sad face, and said with a face full of desire, "Tisk Penelope." Looking at the old man's appearance, Moses Adams clicked his tongue. After thinking about it, he called out to the outside. Following his call, a woman in a woman's suit came in from outside. This woman looked like she was only 24 or 25 years old. She should have just graduated from university not long ago, because there was still a trace of immaturity on her face. At the same time, there was no makeup on her face, which was also an acknowledgement of her youth. However, he had to admit that this girl was really good-looking. She looked about 1.78 meters tall, had exquisite facial features, and a slightly thin body. She was wearing a slightly loose woman's suit, and her curly blonde hair was scattered behind her head. Hearing Moses Adams's words, the girl couldn't help but turn around from outside the door with a modified laptop. Rubbing his temples, Moses Adams said to the girl, "Check if I'll be able to take the train tomorrow." "Penelope, I heard that you were born here?" Sitting in a Lexus RX, Moses Adams asked softly to the beauty sitting in the passenger seat. "Yes, sir." Hearing Moses Adams's words, the girl just nodded faintly, but her eyes kept looking out of the window, as if she was recalling something. As for the old man sitting behind her, at this time, he was much more nervous. "Mr. Smith, I think you must understand that this time, I did not bring you here, but you must come with me, okay?" Looking at the nervous old man beside him, Moses Adams sighed. Sometimes he was too soft-hearted. "I understand, Mr. Adams." Upon hearing that Moses Adams wanted to cut ties with him, the old man nodded solemnly and said with a serious expression, The success or failure of this operation would depend on this. Not long after, the car drove to the front of Green Forest Manor. The originally dilapidated gate had been repaired after Jiang Hai came. Now, the gate here had changed from its original dilapidated appearance to a new one. On the gate, Jiang Hai designed a Huaxia dragon green forest. To be honest, Jiang Hai did not like this name. But after all, when he came here, it was already the second half of the year. In other words, the green forest had already existed for more than half a year. Even if he wanted to change the name, he would have to wait until April 15th next year. As for April 15th next year, what was the meaning of that? As long as you asked anyone in the United States, they would tell you that it was a disaster day. To be precise, it was the day to file taxes. Although Green Forest did not produce this year, the land use tax that should be paid still had to be paid. Jiang Hai was ready. After April 15th next year, he would change the name of his manor. As for what to change it to, he had not thought about it yet. His initial idea was to change it to Soaring Dragon Manor, but it was a little chinibu. As it turned out, Jiang Hai really did not have a talent for naming. After verifying his identity, the Lexus drove all the way to the residential area of the manor. Not long after, they arrived in front of the parking lot in the distance. Moses Adams saw Jiang Hai from afar. At this time, he was lying in front of the largest villa. Beside him were 2 dogs and a horse, but the horse was a little big. "Hey Mr. Jiang, you are in a good mood. Are you still sunbathing?" The car stopped, and the 4 people got out together. Moses Adams walked in front and walked towards Jiang Hai with a smile. Although he was usually a man of few words and smiles, in the face of his god of fortune, he still knew to greet him with a smile. "Ahem, it's okay." Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai also stood up from the recliner that Robin specially made in order to please him, and said to Moses Adams with a slightly embarrassed expression. In fact, he also had an activity today. He was going to watch the slaughter of cows. This was booked yesterday, but he still overestimated his adaptability. At first, he was quite happy when he watched the cows being caught and tied up. But when the white knife went in and the red knife came out and began to bleed, he could not stand it anymore. He rolled and crawled away, lying on the side and vomiting. In the end, he decided not to watch it. Not only did he not want to watch it, but he also did not want the 2 dogs to watch it. Of course, in the end, he thought about it and brought the Sharma horse over. It was the first time he walked it. Just now, when he was lying here, he was thinking about what to call this horse. According to the attitude of naming Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang, if it really did not work, he would just call it Xiao Xia. From this, it was really obvious that Jiang Hai was really not suitable for naming. "You came here in that car? You didn't die from the bumpy ride?" After shaking hands with Moses Adams, Jiang Hai glanced at Penelope behind him, and then retracted his gaze. He only glanced at the beauty of the 2 men who would be interested in her. Compared to knowing these people, he was more interested in Moses Adams not dying from the bumpy ride. After all, he was still very clear about the road in front of his door. It was difficult to drive a 4-wheeled motorcycle. Usually, he could only drive a pickup truck. Of course, if it was an off-road vehicle, it was also fine. He really had not tried a car. "Haha, boss, you just came to the United States. Maybe you are not too familiar with our customs here. Generally speaking, if the family is not very short of money, the average family will have 3 cars. A car, a sedan off-road vehicle, and an MPV. The MPV is for the family to go out together. The off-road vehicle is for us to drive when we go out to play. But no matter if it is to pick someone up or what, it must be a car. This is the respect for others. Other cars, no matter how expensive they are not allowed." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also laughed. He had seen many Huaxia rich people like Jiang Hai. He also knew that in Huaxia, the strength of the car evaluation was actually based on the amount of money, not the function of the car. This was also the difference between the East and the West. In Moses Adams' view, to talk about business, he had to drive this car. Today's update was sent to everyone. Little Faye had something to do tonight, so it was set to a time limit. Please support and bookmark it. Chapter 70. Let's talk inside. After exchanging a few pleasantries with them, Jiang Hai raised his hand and said to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone did not say much and directly followed Jiang Hai into the house. As for the two dogs and the big horse, Jiang Hai let them play. Compared to Xiao Bai and little Xia who went to play directly, Xiao Huang hesitated. Although he only went to play, he did not go far. Instead, he stayed at the door. If anything happened, he could directly go in and help Jiang Hai. Of course, no one knew what he was thinking, but Jiang Hai vaguely felt that this dog was really extraordinarily loyal. Jiang Hai was comforted. The group walked into Jiang Hai's villa and did not go anywhere else. Instead, they sat down directly in the living room. Jiang Hai personally went to the wine cabinet next to him to get some drinks. After asking, Moses Adams wanted to drink red wine. The girl who came with him only asked for orange juice. The old man, like Jiang Hai, asked for a can of beer. As for the driver, he did not dare to drink while driving, so he also asked for a drink. I'm here this time mainly to report to you about the progress of the lawsuit. After everyone sat down, Moses Adams took a bag from the girl next to him. After opening it, there were some documents inside. He took out a stack of them and handed it to Jiang Hai. Although Jiang Hai was now possessed by the dragon spirit and had developed a lot in terms of intelligence, he still did not want to study. But in general, he was still unwilling to learn. If it was related to his manner, then he could calm down and take a look. But for things like this, he really could not calm down. He just took a simple look. It was mainly written about the conviction report of those people. These people were prosecuted by Moses Adams on 4 charges: attempted kidnapping, attempted murder, extortion, and malicious wounding. Of these 4 charges, 3 of them had passed the trial of the court: attempted kidnapping, attempted murder, and extortion. As for malicious wounding, it was not established because it seemed that these people were more seriously injured. However, these 3 sentences alone were not light sentences. The first was Faraday Wilson, and the other was Solomon Dury. Both of them were sentenced to 76 months in prison. 72 months was 6 years, which was 6 years, which was 6 years and 4 months. The others were basically sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. To be honest, Jiang Hai felt that it was a little light. However, Jiang Hai did not have the final say. This was only his subjective intention. If it was Jiang Hai who judged these people who wanted to kill him, it would not be too much to just shoot them directly. Unfortunately, the 4 charges mentioned above were not officially established. Kidnapping was only an attempt, attempted murder, and extortion were actually just words. These were already extremely heavy sentences, so even if Jiang Hai was unhappy, he could only accept it. What? Bribe others to go to prison and kill these guys? Jiang Hai thought about it, but it was just a thought. He had just arrived here and was unfamiliar with this place. He was not prepared to put himself in prison again because of something. That would be too much of a loss. The second thing is the lawsuit against the police organization here. Because of this, we can't do anything about the state and city police stations. We can only arrest the county police station. The policeman who blackmailed you was also arrested. He will probably be sentenced to about 3 years in prison. His superior is the deputy chief of the police station. He will probably be sentenced to about 3 years in prison. As Moses Adams spoke, he winked at the old man sitting next to him. So when he finished speaking, the old man had already stood up. Mr. Jiang Hai, hello, let me introduce myself. My name is Morris Smith, the chief of our Winthrop Police Department. I came to visit you before, but you didn't see me. This time, I shamelessly asked Mr. Moses Adams to come here. I just want to ask you, can this matter end here? Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man said with a sincere face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai could not help but frown slightly. What do the higher-ups of this country mean? Ignoring the old man next to him, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. Other than these 2 judges, everyone else will be removed from their duties and transferred over from other places. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams said with a serious face. The police in the United States are mainly divided into 3 levels: federal, state, and city and county. The federal and state police exercise the powers granted by the federal and state respectively. The powers of the police below the state level are determined by the state itself. In other words, in addition to the federal police, state police, city police, county police, and even private security have no subordinate relationship with the federal government. They are directly led by the local government. Unless there is a major case, no one can control each other. This is the same as the President and Governor of the United States. The President is elected by the people of the United States, and the Governor is elected by the people of the state. In the legal position of each state, the Governor and the President are equal. It is not that you are the President and I am the Governor, so I am one level lower than you. This does not exist in the United States. Therefore, although this case alarmed the FBA, after all, this is also an international scandal. But after confirming that this matter will not be upgraded to an international status, this matter was transferred to the state government to solve it. After the state government investigated the case, they found out that the man was lying. Strictly speaking, this matter has nothing to do with the state and the city. It is just a problem with the police station in Winthrop Town. Generally speaking, to deal with such matters in the United States, they will directly deal with the people under them. But Jiang Hai's identity is different. He is a rich man, so the state government decided to give face to Jiang Hai and replace all of them. Please let's stop here. To put it bluntly, this matter is entirely the personal behavior of those two guys. It has nothing to do with others. If they are replaced, then these people will have a dark history on their resumes. It will be troublesome if they want to find a job in the future. Hearing Moses Adams's words, the old man on the other side begged helplessly, "Why should I stop it here? How do you know that these people did not receive dirty money? Is it because if I don't have money and such power, I should be receiving dirty money when I come here? Do I deserve it? Who did I offend? This time, it will be a lesson for you. In the future, keep an eye on the people around you. Don't think that you can ignore this matter, because it has nothing to do with you. Even if you know about it, you will be implicated." If it was a normal person with a Virgin Mary character, seeing the old man begging him like this, he might have been soft-hearted. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not have such thoughts. Although he was not a bad person, he was never a good person either. He did not believe that no one knew that these two people were receiving dirty money when they were all in the same police station. These people definitely knew, but since they did not say anything, then they had to bear the responsibility of such a matter. What do you mean by letting people off when possible? What do you mean by turning a big problem into a small one, and turning a small one into nothing? What do you mean by helping others? Sympathizing with others? Why didn't these people have this kind of helping others in the past? Why didn't these people sympathize with others? When others were suffering, they were watching the fun from the side. Everyone was sweeping the snow in front of their own door. One had frost on the roof, and now he still wanted others to sympathize with him? At least for Jiang Hai, it did not exist. It was impossible. It could be said that he had a heart of stone, but he just wanted to remind these people not to think that these matters had nothing to do with them. Who knows when these misfortunes would fall on him? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man's face could not help but be a little distressed. He knew that although Jiang Hai was a little too ruthless, he did not do anything wrong. This was a responsibility that he could use, so he had nothing to say. "Boss, take a look at this first." Seeing that the situation was a little stiff for a moment, Moses Adams took out a piece of paper from the stack of papers given to Jiang Hai, and gave it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was originally in a fit of anger, but when he saw what was written on the paper in front of him, he was stunned for a moment. It was because on this piece of paper, there was a statement of intent. The statement of intent was issued by Winthrop Town. It said that it was to support Jiang Hai, the owner of the big manor, in the local brand effect. It could decide to exempt Jiang Hai from 0.2% of the land use tax every year. In other words, he would only need to pay 1% in the future. At the same time, when Jiang Hai bought fish, fry fish feed, cow feed and cattle, he would be able to enjoy a 1.3% subsidy from the government. In other words, the 20 million that Jiang Hai spent on cattle could be made up for 260,000, and the land use tax would be reduced from 330 years to 2,800,000 annually. Adding it all together, there was still money left for the fry and feed in the future. In other words, it would save him about $1 million every year. However, it was obvious that this statement of intent was only a draft at this time. Needless to say, Jiang Hai also understood that this was also the intention of the Winthrop Town Hall, to smooth over this matter. If Jiang Hai continued to pursue this matter, he would naturally not be able to enjoy the benefits of this town. Glancing at Moses Adams, Jiang Hai could tell what he was thinking from his eyes. Moses Adams had probably received this letter of intent first. When the old man came to beg him, he also wanted to hide it, so he decided that when he came this time, he would show it to Jiang Hai together. To put it bluntly, he was just a lawyer. As for the specifics, it was still up to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai looked at the letter of intent and hesitated. On one hand, he could vent almost 70% of his anger in one breath. On the other hand, there was the annual benefits of $1 million, the gratitude of all the police officers, and the goodwill of the town hall. Although Jiang Hai was a person who could get carried away easily sometimes, he was not a fool. After hesitating for about 5 minutes, Jiang Hai handed the piece of paper in his hand to Moses Adams. Moses Adams also chuckled. It seemed that Jiang Hai understood. Since those two guys have been arrested, this matter will end here. I don't need you to resign. I heard that you're about to retire, so let's leave it at that for now. However, I won't give up my right to pursue this matter. I think you understand what I'm saying. Today's second update was delivered consecutively. Chapter 71. $1 million was a small matter. The relationship with the local government was what Jiang Hai valued the most. Of course, if he could save $1 million, he would save it. This time, Jiang Hai understood that he was doing the local government a favor. This was because in the United States, the local governments were not unified. Especially the county governments, there were a lot of shenanigans in there. In the United States, the most powerful department was neither the FBI nor the CIA. It was also not the United States Internal Revenue Service, which was known as the Sword of Damocles. It was the county police. According to the laws of the United States, the director of the county police station was elected by the local government. Not only was it independent of the local government, but it also had the functions of the criminal, judicial, and judicial system in one body. In other words, they were the ones who arrested people, and they were also the ones who sentenced you in court. Therefore, after being arrested by the county police, they were sentenced very quickly, because they did not have to face other judges and juries. They were the judges and juries, and even the prison was under their control. With such a highly centralized department, it would be really troublesome if the county government was not firmly in their hands. If they really let the state government send someone else to manage the county police station and give them some work every now and then, the county government would probably have a headache. Therefore, they deliberately sent such a message to Moses Adams. Obviously, they were much more sensible than this old man. What was the use of just begging Jiang Hai? If you did not have enough sincerity, you would not be able to open the hearts of capitalists like him. However, it was obvious that Jiang Hai was not a real capitalist. Compared to those old guys on Wall Street, he was at most a small peddler who left when he saw the profits. Therefore, when he saw the intention on the paper, Jiang Hai had already agreed. Thank you so much, thank you so much. Murray Smith obviously knew what was on the paper. Although he knew that Jiang Hai agreed not because of his pleading, the most important thing was that Jiang Hai agreed. On the spot, the old man said to Jiang Hai with a face full of excitement, "The jobs of the people in the police station were saved. Boss, the cows are all dead. This is the meat you wanted. Our cows. I don't know if it was a good choice or the feng shui here, but we chose a random cow to kill, and it really turned out to be top-grade beef." And, just as the atmosphere here was calming down, Jiang Hai's door opened. Burke Dollar walked in with 3 big pieces of beef with a smile on his face. However, when he saw the situation in the room, he could not help but be stunned. At the same time, His eyes fell on the woman who came with Moses Adams. His eyes instantly became dull. The woman glanced at him, and no longer looked at him. Ahem, how's the beef? Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, Jiang Hai could not help but stand up, walk up to Burke Dollar, and ask him with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Burke Dollar reacted. The quality of the beef is good. Ahem. The quality of the beef is quite good, and the meat yield is also very high. We chose a 1,600-pound bull, and the whole meat is a little more than 1,000 pounds. It almost reached the maximum yield of 65%, and the quality of the meat is also very good. The brisket and chest have reached the best grade, while the shoulder, upper brain, buttocks, and outer ribs have all reached the best grade. Most of the ribs and tenderloins have dense marbled veins, reaching the best grade. We weighed them, and the weight of these 2 pieces of meat is about 160 pounds. If we sell these pieces of meat, we will get back the money for the bull, the money for the feed, and the money for buying a new bull. The rest is pure profit. Boss, shall we sell this meat? Boss, do you want to sell the beef? After pausing for a while, Burke Dollar remembered the purpose of his visit, and hurriedly said excitedly, whether the beef was good or not mainly depended on whether there were marble veins. However, this was like stone gambling. Before killing the cow, no one knew how beautiful the marble veins were. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a slice of heaven or a slice of hell. The only difference was that an experienced cowboy could roughly estimate it in his heart. But today, the cows that Luo Binsi and the others killed were randomly selected. After all, these cows had only been here for less than a month. Although they looked good, how good could a cow that was bought in the market in a month's time be? According to their estimation, even if there were marble veins, the yield would be about 3% to 5%. That was to say, out of 1,000 pounds of beef, it would be good if there were 30 or 50 pounds of meat. Moreover, the quality would not be too good. It would not reach the top grade, but at least it would be top grade. However, they did not expect that in just 1 month, the cow would have undergone earth-shattering changes. But at least the meat had already shocked them. The yield of the whole cow was more than 1,000 pounds. Not to mention that the beef with marble veins, that was the top grade beef, accounted for 70% of it. Only the neck and tendon were not marbled. Out of the 700 pounds, 300 pounds were top grade beef, 230 pounds were top grade beef, and the last 100 pounds were top grade beef. This time, they were dumbfounded. According to the market price, of course, it was the selling price. The average price of a pound of premium beef was $375 in the United States, $130 for specially selected beef, and $50 for preferred beef. 160 pounds of premium beef alone was worth $60,000. 230 pounds of specially selected beef was worth $30,000, and 300 pounds of preferred beef was worth $15,000. That was to say, the meat alone was worth $100,000. Of course, that was the retail price outside. They couldn't sell it at such a high price, so they could only give it a 30% discount. But the 700 pounds of beef alone was worth $70,000. Together with the leftovers, it wasn't a problem to sell a cow for $75,000. The cost of buying a cow was only $1,000. Adding in the cost of labor and feed, it was only $2,000. The remaining $70,000 was pure profit. Of course, one could not expect all the cows to be like this. But according to Jiang Hai's estimation, after a month of domestication, at least 3,000 of his 20,000 cows were at this level. As for the remaining 16,000 or so, it was unlikely to sell them for $70,000, but it was possible to sell them for more than 3. This was also why he dared to fight with that company. Gulp. Hearing Burke Dollar's words, Moses Adams could not help but swallow. Since he was the lawyer chosen by American Express for Jiang Hai, he naturally did some research on Jiang Hai. He had even done the most basic research on fixed assets. He knew that the main profit of Jiang Hai's manor was the beef cows. There were nearly 20,000 of them. He calculated based on the normal price of beef cows in the United States. The price of a beef cow was about $1,000, But when it was well raised and sold at the slaughterhouse, the price would not be too high. It would be between $3,000 to $4,000. Jiang Hai's 20,000 cows were probably only worth about $60 to $80 million. But this was living money, and there was a lot of it every year. What's more, Jiang Hai's ranch could raise 100,000 cows. If he could raise 100,000 cows, he would make hundreds of millions a year. So in Moses Adams's view, Jiang Hai was a stock with potential. Maybe he was not as good as those people on Wall Street, but as long as he focused on raising cows, he would have a bright future. But now he knew that he was wrong. How was Jiang Hai a bright future? If his 20,000 cows were of such quality, then they would be worth more than $1 billion. Thinking of this, he could not help but swallow. It seemed that he had found a golden thigh. What are you selling? I've been here for so long, but I haven't eaten any premium grade beef. Cut half of it and keep it for me. Give the other half to Mrs. Phillip. I'm going to eat this tonight. Everyone in Huaxia, you are a guest. If you don't have anything else to do, let's have dinner together tonight. Hearing Burkdollar's words, Jiang Hai grinned. He knew it would be like this, so he did not show too much other than his excitement. Tens of thousands of dollars. Although Jiang Hai was short on money, he did not lack tens of thousands of dollars. Moreover, this was the first time he had killed a cow in his manor. Naturally, he had to try it. Okay. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Burkdollar also laughed. Although he had been herding for so many years, he had never eaten special grade beef even once. Except for the cattle ranchers, who would occasionally eat a piece. The rest would be sold to the top Western restaurants. And the top steaks in these Western restaurants were sold by the ounce. 1 pound was equal to 16 ounces. According to Huaxia's measurement unit, 1 ounce was about half a tael. However, this half a tael of beef would sell for more than $20 on average. A steak of about 8 ounces would cost more than $100. Ordinary ranchers would not be willing to eat it, let alone give it to these cowboys. But Jiang Hai was willing to. Although he was a little stingy sometimes, he was quite generous when it came to food. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Burkdollar directly took the meat to the kitchen, cut off more than half of the best meat, and put it in Jiang Hai's freezer. Carrying about 70 pounds of beef, he left Jiang Hai's house. Penelope, we don't have anything to do tonight, right? Looking at the beef that Burkdollar brought out, Moses Adams said with a smile. Upon hearing his words, the young lady beside him also checked it out. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a meeting about energy. You don't have to attend that meeting. Even if you attend, you'll only listen to those old men's chatter. Before the girl could finish her words, Moses Adams had already waved his hand to stop her from continuing. As expected of a fresh graduate, she was really honest. Today's update was delivered to everyone. 2 updates in a row. Chapter 72. In fact, Moses Adams's words just now meant that he wanted to stay, but the girl named Penelope wasn't too clear about it. For Moses Adams, staying here today was an out-and-out good thing. First, he could eat beef for free. Even he wouldn't spend too much on this kind of beef, so he really wanted to try it. Second, and the most important, was to build a relationship with Jiang Hai. He had known Jiang Hai for a while. In the past, he only thought of Jiang Hai as someone with potential. Although he did his best, there was no need to curry favor with him, at least for now. But just now he realized that he was wrong. Jiang Hai was not someone with potential, but a Godzilla. If all the cows in his manor were of such quality, then Jiang Hai might be able to reach the top in a few years. With such a golden thigh, if he didn't know how to hold on to it, then he would be too stupid. So no matter what, even if his wife was going to give birth to a son tonight, he would wait here until the meal was over. Since he said so, the driver naturally had nothing to say. As for Penelope, she also tactfully kept her mouth shut. She was just an assistant now. If she said something wrong, and was fired by Moses Adams, she would have nothing to say. As for Maris Smith, he was a little embarrassed. He could not leave now, but he could not stay. After all, his relationship with Jiang Hai was still in a delicate state just now. However, Jiang Hai was not a petty person. He said that it would end here. So it would end here. Immediately, A smile appeared on his face, and he began to tour his house with the people around him. This villa, in Moses Adams' eyes, could only be considered to be well decorated. Although it was much, much better than his house, he was after all a big lawyer, and had seen the world. Jiang Hai's house, compared to other rich people, could only be regarded as ordinary decoration. The furniture was also mass-produced, not limited edition or antique. There were no oil paintings hanging on the wall, so it looked a little empty. Although the house was a good house, it could only be regarded as simple in Moses Adams' eyes. However, in the eyes of others, Jiang Hai's house was quite luxurious, because it was probably difficult for them to live in such a house. Of course, Penelope was different. If she married a rich man, she could live in such a house. After a simple tour of the villa, Jiang Hai took them to the dock. However, it was very cold now, and these people did not wear thick clothes, especially Penelope. She did not know if it was because of beauty overcoming the cold, but she was still wearing silk stockings. In a warm room, this was a good scenery, but outside, she would freeze to death, so naturally, they could not go out by boat. Then they went to the cowshed. At this time, the bloodstains at the place where the cows were killed had been cleaned up, but the smell of cow dung mixed with the smell of blood still rushed to their noses. Jiang Hai could not stand it, let alone Moses Adams. This was the first time he had smelled such a smell, so after a quick glance they quickly fled the area. But what surprised Jiang Hai was that the girl was very calm. This made Jiang Hai and the others feel a little ashamed. Why were they inferior to a woman? But fortunately, their shame did not last long. After they returned to the villa, Jiang Hai opened a bottle of red wine, and then everyone began to watch TV and chat. Compared to China, the competition in the US TV station was much more intense, because in addition to the state-owned TV stations, there were also a lot of private TV stations. Most of these private TV stations charged fees, but if the TV program was not good naturally, no one would renew the subscription. Because of this, the competition in the US TV station was quite fierce. There were dozens of TV stations that broadcast live sports. They broadcast all kinds of events, such as baseball, tennis, basketball, football, ice hockey, football, and so on. There were also nearly 10 TV stations that broadcast live NBA games. In the US, the three known TV stations were ABC, TNT, and ESPN. Among them, ABC was broadcast live on Sunday, Eastern US time, TNT on Monday and Thursday, and ESPN on Wednesday and Friday. In addition, there were also FSN, NBA TV, and so on. Of course, there were also local TV stations. In short, it was not a big deal to watch NBA games in the US. Moreover, don't look at the fact that Jiang Hai and the others were only in the afternoon. However, many matches had already started. The games in the US and East started relatively early. The earliest games even started in the middle of the night. In local time, it was around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. When Jiang Hai turned on the TV, it was just in time to play the game between the San Antonio Spurs and the Boston Celtics. If it was 5 years ago, this would have been a fierce battle. But at this time it was just a teaching game. A long, long time ago, the Spurs were also an iron-blooded defensive team. Countless teams had been killed by their defense. In that period of time, they had won 4 championships. With third Uncle Bao as the core of the defensive lineup, countless talents had been crippled. If you dare to stare at me, I'll let you lie in bed for 3 years if the rules allow it. This is the Spurs' way of doing things. But unknowingly, the Spurs had completed a transformation. Now the Spurs only had one way of playing, and that was to trick people. Their scoring was considered average, and their playing style was called cheating. Just when everyone thought they were done for, this group of old men from last year returned to the finals. If it wasn't for the sudden appearance of another old man called Ray Allen, and if it wasn't for the fact that the young Kawhi Leonard didn't hit a free throw, they might have defeated the Heat at their peak. But this year they had made a comeback. No one thought they were old anymore. This year, they had been focused on winning the championship from the start. And their opponent was the home team, the Boston Celtics. But compared to the Spurs, the Boston Celtics were already on the decline. At least for now, It was hard to see any hope for them to rise again. In the first half of the game, the Celtics were still leading the Spurs by 4 points. This gave them a glimmer of hope. But in the second half, the situation changed. The Spurs began to shamelessly whip these young players. After the third quarter, not only were the 4 points that they had originally won wiped out, but they were even back by 5 points. The young players began to lose their minds. In the fourth quarter, the Spurs started to beat the Celtics and easily won the game, 111-89. Jiang Hai and the others were still in the mood to chat about this game at the beginning. But as they watched, they did not want to talk anymore. Sigh, I don't know when the Celtics will rise again. I'm really afraid that I won't be able to wait until that day. As the game ended, Harris Smith, who was sitting beside Jiang Hai, rubbed his eyes gently and said helplessly, "It's not bad. At least these people are still working hard. My favorite team is the Knicks. I've given up a long time ago." Hearing Morris' words, Moses Adams chuckled and shrugged helplessly as he said to the old man, "Hey boss, dinner is ready." At this moment, the door of the villa opened. Robbins walked in with a smile on his face and said to Jiang Hai and the people sitting there, "Let's go. Let's taste the special beef produced in my manor." Hearing Robbins' words, Jiang Hai also smiled and got up to speak to the people around him. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Moses Adams and Morris Smith stood up at the same time and followed Jiang Hai out. Only the girl named Penelope paused for a moment before standing up. Looking at the girl, Robbins, who was walking over, could not help but be stunned for a moment. A trace of doubt flashed across his face, but he did not say much. After all, there were still outsiders here. He continued to bring Jiang Hai and the others to the Philemon family's small villa. Originally, the owner of this manor was also a rich guy. Although he might not be like Jiang Hai, who was willing to give his workers such good food, at least in terms of living, he was still very generous. These small villas were not worse than the small villas in the suburbs. At least in terms of size, they were not much worse than Moses Adams' house. It was not a problem to sit a dozen people. Of course, the interior decoration was far worse. Wow, it's really a warm house. Walking into Philemon's house, Moses Adams could not help but chuckle softly. Of course, our boss is the most generous boss in the world. At this time, Robbins, who was walking in front, also said with a smile. After Jiang Hai introduced everyone also sat at a long table. Serve the food. Looking at this warm atmosphere, Philemon and his wife, who were busy in the kitchen, also came out with a variety of things. Although it was a party, the main dish was naturally beef, but in addition to beef, there was also yesterday's fish. They have a total of 9 people including Jiang Hai. They can't eat dozens of pounds of fish in a meal, so there was a lot left today. In addition, this morning, Jiang Hai also brought the shrimp he caught yesterday to eat together. So today's dishes here are still very good. Looking at the 8 big bowls and plates on the table, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel hungry. Bell had already prepared for a long time. Seeing that the dishes were on the table, he divided the dishes among everyone. The men's glasses were also filled with wine, beer, red wine and some foreign wine. These were all bought by Jiang Hai last time in Winthrop Town. The dinner began. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 73. It was said that Easterners liked to bootlick. Actually, bootlicker was a common trait among humans. Don't think that just because the Americans were burly and boorish, they wouldn't know how to bootlick, just because they were always talking about freedom, democracy and power. Now they were eating Jiang Hai's food, living in Jiang Hai, and earning Jiang Hai's money. Of course, they had to work hard. But in the current environment of the United States, in order to keep their current jobs, they will also flatter Jiang Hai on some small matters. For example, they are slowly improving the food they eat. Mrs. Philemon was a pure housewife. Because she did not need to go out to earn money, she had a lot of time. What she needed to do every day was actually very simple. She would wake up in the morning and prepare breakfast. In the morning, she would go to the vegetable field behind Jiang Hai's villa to take a look. The Americans almost did not eat raw vegetables. There were mainly 3 ways to eat vegetables here. The first way was to eat raw vegetables, such as carrots, lettuce, turnips, cucumbers, and so on. Raw vegetables were their favorite. Other than that, they could be steamed. The most famous one was mashed potatoes. After steaming, they could be made into mud. Then some things could be added inside. Of course, other than potatoes, carrots, cauliflower, and so on could also be made into mud. The third way was to fry them. Other than these three ways, there were no other ways to eat them. So, in the supermarkets in the United States, other than huaxia, there were many types of vegetables sold. But most of them were different from the vegetables in China. For example, in the supermarket in Winthrop that Jiang Hai had been to before, there were many vegetables that Jiang Hai did not recognize. For example, the most famous basil was a type of vegetable, and also a type of spice. The rest of the vegetables were very common here, such as parsley, leeks, kale, beets, kohlrabi. It was the Chinese pickled vegetables, but it was not pickled here. Parsnips that looked like carrots and vegetables like rhubarb. In short, if one came to the United States without a huaxia supermarket, one might starve to death. There was a small vegetable garden behind Jiang Hai's villa. However, Jiang Hai did not know how to grow vegetables. Compared to meat, he did not like to eat vegetables. So he did not care too much about the garden. This small vegetable garden was now taken care of by Mrs. Philemon. Of course, it was cold now. She had already harvested all the vegetables that should be harvested. She was waiting for next year to be planted again. Today, the Philemon family specially made 8 dishes. There were fruits, appetizers, main dishes, and soup. The soup was naturally the most famous cheddar soup near Boston. It was made with the shellfish that were caught yesterday. These shellfish were deep-sea shellfish, and the taste was quite good. A fruit salad was necessary. As for the vegetables, they made fried vegetables. There were fresh flowers, cauliflower, eggplant, carrots, and so on. There was also a plate of mashed potatoes. But according to the habits of the people in the United States, the taste of mashed potatoes was basically sour and sweet. But because of Jiang Hai, the taste of mashed potatoes was salty. Apart from these 4 dishes, the other 4 dishes were all meat dishes. The main dish was naturally steak. Today, Jiang Hai had Burke cut the premium grade beef. Of course, most of the premium grade beef was left in Jiang Hai's freezer by Burke. The premium grade beef he cut was calculated according to the number of people, 1 pound per person. But even so, these people were very happy. Apart from these steaks, there were also many other steaks. However, these steaks were all premium grade. Although they were a grade lower, for the people here, they were not dissatisfied. In their eyes, having a pound of beef to eat was already a great gift. It had to be noted that they only made around $100 a day. Mrs. Philemon didn't let go of the remaining meat that wasn't suitable to be made into steak. Instead, she specially stewed a big pot of beef soup with basil inside. The taste was quite good in Jiang Hai's mouth. Apart from these 2 beef dishes, the rest was seafood. The fish that was caught yesterday was divided into 2 slices. The bones in the middle were shaved off, and then they were fried on both sides. Lemon juice was used to remove the fishy smell. It tasted sour and sweet with the sweet aroma of the fish. It was quite good. There was also seafood, which was the shrimp and crab that Jiang Hai had brought over. These live seafood didn't need much processing. They could be eaten after being boiled in salt water. They were specially made to eat the sweet aroma inside. In fact, the price of the same seafood would be different depending on where it was sold. Everyone knew that the fish in the warm and tropical regions were more abundant and grew faster than the fish in the cold regions. However, of the 4 largest fisheries in the world, apart from the Peruvian fishery, the remaining 3 were all fisheries in the northern hemisphere. Whether it was the North Sea fishery, the Hokkaido fishery, or the Newfoundland fishery, that was very close to Jiang Hai's manor. Of course, Newfoundland was now finished, but it was undeniable that the current fishing industry was still mainly in the northern hemisphere, even near the cold regions. Even within the country, the output might be higher in the south, but in terms of taste, it was still the north that was most delicious. There were reasons for this. Firstly, the fish in the north were cold water. The water was cold, so the fish didn't grow fast. A fish that grew in a year in the south would take 2, 3, or even 4 or 5 years in the north. The accumulation of these 4 or 5 years would naturally make the taste better. Secondly, the cold current in the north passed by. In order to avoid the cold on the surface, the fish were more willing to go to the deep sea. The water pressure in the deep sea was higher, and the pressure outside was higher, so the meat of the fish was firmer. The same fish and prawns in the south might be bigger than those in the north, but the taste of the north was slightly better than that of the south. Jiang Hai used to live in Ice City. Although it was not near the sea, as a foodie, he was also very knowledgeable in this aspect. Now the prawns and crabs that Jiang Hai caught were all from his fish farm. They had been growing naturally for 10 years. The taste was sweet and fresh, and with the taste of the sea, the meat was extremely firm. Even Moses Adams, who had seen a lot of the world, could eat with delight. As a lawyer, although he usually paid attention to his appearance, as he said, he was just a tool. In order to earn the money of those rich people, he could naturally sit at the Western dining table in a tuxedo like a gentleman, sipping red wine and cutting steak. In the next second, he could become a street gangster, eating big pieces of meat and drinking big mouthfuls of wine. For a service industry like his, the most important thing was to please the employer. Of course, this also depended on whether the employer had the ability. Obviously, in his eyes, Jiang Hai was a person with ability. Naturally, the guests and the host enjoyed the meal. Moses Adams, as a lawyer, was naturally not allowed to drink when he was handling a case. However, after the case was settled, there were a lot of social activities, so his alcohol tolerance was not bad. As for Robbins, Burke Dollar, and the others, they were naturally wine buckets. Compared to them, even though Jiang Hai's physical fitness had reached the human limit, his body's alcohol tolerance was incomparable. Therefore, after mixing red, white, and beer for a while, Jiang Hai felt a little dizzy. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai decided to leave first and get some fresh air outside. He walked 3 steps to the outside of the villa. Looking at the sky full of stars and the salty sea breeze, Jiang Hai felt a little better. At this moment he seemed to hear some quarreling. Listening to the quarreling voices, Jiang Hai's brows wrinkled. He could roughly tell that one of the voices came from his manners employee, Burke Doll, while the other one was a woman's voice. But in his manner, there was only one woman, Mrs. Philemon. However, it was clear that this was a young woman's voice. It had nothing to do with Mrs. Philemon's voice. In that case, it could only be the girl that Moses Adams had brought over. Could it be that something has happened? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai felt a lot better. In fact, he also felt that something was wrong with a man and a woman quarreling in the dark outside. Could it be that Burke Dollar had lost his mind? If that was the case, it would be troublesome. Although Moses Adams was fawning over him, he was not a pimp. If something really happened, Jiang Hai would have sobered up by now. Based on the subtle voices, Jiang Hai's 5 senses were activated to the extreme. Following the direction of the voices, he quickly walked to the back of the house. Sure enough, not far from the back of the house, Jiang Hai saw Burke Dollar and the girl that Moses Adams had brought over under the moonlight. Seeing that there was at least 2 to 3 meters between them, their clothes were not messy, and they did not do anything that would cause any misunderstanding, Jiang Hai was temporarily relieved. But then, he became interested in what these 2 people were talking about here alone in the middle of the night. Although Jiang Hai was a man, he was also quite gossipy sometimes. Without saying much, he turned around and hid in a corner to watch the scene in front of him. Penelope, when did you return to Boston? You didn't tell me. I don't know if your mother showed you the letters I've written to you for so many years. The 2 people under the moonlight did not notice Jiang Hai's existence. Burke Dollar looked at Penelope, who was like a block of ice in front of him. He took a deep breath, lowered his head, and said in a deep voice, "It seems that this guy is really related to this girl." "Show me what?" "Look at my father, how poor and destitute. How useless he is. I really can't imagine what you were like when my mother and I left. You're still like this now. What can I tell you?" Hearing Burke Dollar's words, the woman on the other side raised her head and said coldly without thinking, "Today's update was delivered to everyone. The recommendation from the top was really amazing. There were 200+ favorites on Sunday. Amazing. You're tuning in to the Lee May's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.